Release that witch eye by Ermu. Chapter 481, The City of Neverwinter. On the designated groundbreaking day, Roland got up very early. He shaved the stubble on his face, tied up his long gray hair with a simple band, and used a small pair of scissors to trim his brows. After a year of living in this world, he was very experienced in grooming himself and did not need a maid's help. Looking at his blurry reflection in the silver mirror, he felt that he somehow had the divine manner of a reclusive Taoist priest, if he put on a wide robe. Roland nodded in satisfaction and left for his office. There was Bear waiting for him in the room. "Your Highness," he said with a bow, "a flying messenger has already been sent to Longsong Stronghold and will probably arrive at the Stronghold Castle in half an hour." "Aha, is the venue set up?" "It was all completed by yesterday afternoon, and right now it seems enough to hold the entire population of the town," replied the City Hall director. "Great job," praised Roland, and he slowly walked to the window. The impassable mountain range and the misty forest in the distance were still blanketed in white, and the rising sun scattered rays of golden light onto the snow. He saw moving figures on nearby town streets heading for the rubble city wall area in the west of the town. As a defense line against demonic beasts last year, this rubble city wall that was hastily constructed with concrete played a principal role in the fight. However, it had now become a border between the inner and outer areas of the town. Roland didn't like this kind of clear separation between the rich and the poor, so he decided to tear it down sooner or later, except the symbolic gap area and gate tower. However, before that, he could still utilize it. He chose the middle section of the rubble city wall as the site for the groundbreaking event since it could hold far more people than the square. According to his plan, in order to strengthen the impact of the groundbreaking event on citizens of both cities, Longsong Stronghold would hold a groundbreaking announcement at the same time, which would be synchronized by flying messengers. When the first messenger reached Petrov, Roland would step onto the stage to give a speech. Right now, the gray falcon carrying the news must be soaring among the mountains and over the Redwater River, with a paper slip fastened to its claw as usual, thought Roland, but it doesn't know the significance of the news it's carrying. From the moment it lands, Border Town and Longsong Stronghold will become history. Let's go. He collected his thoughts and turned around. "Yes, Your Highness," Bear said with a smile. Petrov Hull walked slowly onto the constructed wooden stage and looked around. There were not that many people on the square, at least not as many as during the oatmeal distribution last week. This was not surprising, since people were mainly only concerned with food and clothes. Compared to the free oatmeal, a groundbreaking ceremony would not matter that much. It even seemed rather unnecessary to even Petrov himself. The months of demons had ended, but the City Hall still did not receive as many applications for job as they had expected. The notice calling for handymen and construction workers was put up a week ago, but the number of recruits hadn't even reached half of the target amount. Meanwhile, rats seemed to rise back from the ashes, as the police department received more and more reports every day, and only verifying these reports was a painstaking amount of work. His friend René Med complained to him that the arresting team needed twice the men to handle its workload. This actually met Petrov's expectations. The people were just like that, lazy, greedy, and unintelligent. His Highness spent so much time and efforts on them, but what could he get in return? The thing confused him the most was that Roland Wimbledon was clearly a member of the royal family, so where did that strange confidence in the people come from? No matter what, he was firmly tied to the prince's chariot, so all he could do was to follow him faithfully. An eagle caught in the distance, and a gray figure appeared in the sky. Petrov opened his prepared speech draft. "Your Highness, it's almost the time," Bear reminded. The sun had risen halfway into the sky, and the sundial's shadow pointed to 9 o'clock. Roland nodded and walked to the tower railing. As soon as the people saw the prince, their chatter turned into warm cheers, and they all raised their hands to create waves throughout the crowd. Area on both sides of the city wall was packed by a dense crowd of over 20,000 people, which meant that most of the town's residents were gathered here. Roland was glad that he was not holding this groundbreaking ceremony in the central square, since it obviously could not offer enough space for such a huge, excited crowd. He waved his hands to silence the cheers. "Greetings, my subjects." Echo's magnifying ability allowed his voice to reverberate over the entire town. "I believe you already know what's about to happen today. This small town, which was built for the North Slope mine, is soon about to become a real city. In the past, the months of demons was a nightmare for Border Town, and everyone had to escape to Stronghold for shelter. Now, we have built a strong base here. Osmond Ryan, who wanted to ruin the western region, has fallen. The church, which wanted to harm witches and enslave the people, has been banished from this land. Even Timothy Wimbledon, who dared to attempt to destroy me, failed. Even if he set the entire southern and eastern regions on fire, the town would still be safe and sound. I'm sure the refugees who fled here know this best." Roland's words were quickly met with the crowd's responses. "That's right. He burned down the Eagle City and plundered the port of Clearwater. The new king cleaned out Valencia. His knights acted no differently from burglars, sometimes even worse. He took away my son, saying he needed to join the king's city guards. Heavens, he's only 15. The prince reached out his hand to quiet them. And these tragedies will never happen again. This is why the new city is being built. Only by uniting more people can we face our evil enemies and show them the consequences of their recklessness." He paused. "And this is my city, too. I vow that Roland Wimbledon will never leave any of his people behind, and even if the kingdom of Grey Castle is united, he'll never leave this place." A wave of cheers erupted at the foot of the city wall. "Your Highness, you," Berev exclaimed from behind him. Roland waved his hand to silence him. "That's right. This will become the new capital of the Kingdom of Grey Castle, and the kingdom will be reborn. I believe that even if an endless winter arrived, this city would still be as warm as spring." He paused for a while and raised his right hand. "From this day on, Border Town and Longsong Stronghold will become one, and its name will be Long Live the City of Neverwinter. Long live the City of Neverwinter." Everyone became excited, and the deafening chants rang through the sky. A mist of snow erupted on the mountainside, and the echoes rolled endlessly through the peaks. Roland looked at the cheering subjects and felt a great anticipation growing inside him. The sparks of revolution had been ignited, and one day, he would see these sparks turn into a giant flame that would engulf the entire land. Chapter 482, Zero's Will. The upper level of the pivotal secret temple was brightly lit up with dozens of magic stones that made the circular library as bright as day. When one was in this room, it was difficult to believe that it was underground. This area was equivalent to the Tower of Babel of the Hermes Cathedral above ground, and it was Zero's favorite place. She could easily see all of the pivotal secret area through the window. Watching over the figures bustling around the God Stone of Punishment pillar like ants, she felt a great joy in having control over all of these lives. It was as if she was the Lord of the Kingdom of God, and the people walking slowly in the dark were the believers that built the kingdom. When she had free time, she would take a book containing the history and secrets of the Union from a shelf and read it by the window. Of course, she also had to have a cup of black tea with coltsfoot in it next to her. After she became the Pope, Zero was actually more relaxed. She did not worry about the impending battle of divine will, but looked forward to it. After more than 200 years, her life had become quite dull, and the senior demons that were recorded to be unbeatable seemed like exciting opponents. I wonder if I take them into the soul battlefield, will they still be as fearless and terrifying as they appear? However, this battle was still years away, so she needed to set a new goal for herself to pass the time. There were few people Zero concerned, and Roland Wimbledon happened to be one of them. He was the only mortal to interest her so far. He was belittled by everyone, but he came out on top after the royal decree on the selection of Crown Prince, fighting extremely well with his tiny territory against two strong contenders for the throne. This was undoubtedly very rare. Also, she discovered some interesting clues in Garcia's memories. The Queen of Clearwater once placed a maid next to Prince Roland to feed him a deadly poison, but it completely failed, and then the furious queen executed the unlucky alchemist who made the poison. However, Zero had a member of the secret pivotal area replicate the poison according to the recipe in her memories, and the product turned out to be just as the alchemist had promised. It was odorless, colorless, soluble in water, deadly upon intake and incurable. So, did the maid deceive Garcia, or is the current Roland Wimbledon not the same Prince Roland as before? According to the information she had gathered, Zero was more inclined to the second guess. The question is, if he isn't Prince Roland, who is he? Why no one doubted his identity before? The more she pondered on this issue, the more intrigued she became. He was able to change his ways to earn the love of all his subjects, single-handedly redistribute the power in the western region, and make both the church's emissary delegation and crazed army disappear. If such a man was simply the lord of a small territory, it would really be a pity. Thus, Roland Wimbledon had to be included as a member of the church, or in other words, become part of her. Zero could not help but lick her lips. It was also why she changed the sequence of attack. If her guesses were correct, then conquering the kingdom of Grey Castle would bring in more benefits than she could imagine. Of course, as a lord with great authority, he would stay behind the lines during battles, so it was important to figure out how to force him out. Just as Zero was contemplating how to avoid the direct battle and go straight to Roland, Isabella pushed open the library door and walked in. "Is the meeting over?" "Yes." She rubbed her neck. "Lucky you, sitting here reading and sipping tea all day, while I have to lie to those old men." "No, it's actually one old man and two madmen. It's not simply lying. It concerns the operations of the church's lower level," Zero said with a shrug. "Although witches are the actual core of the church, without these men, we wouldn't be able to collect so many resources to achieve our ultimate goal." "Whatever." Isabella yawned. "Anyways, they said that we have to wait until the second month of this summer for the resources to attack the Kingdom of Dawn to be relocated to the battle against the Kingdom of Grey Castle, and even this is an optimistic estimate. This amount of time isn't too long, but it isn't short either, thought Zero, so the wait will both be torturous and make the reward even more enjoyable. How's the pill production going? I think there are about 300,000 to 400,000 pills in storage right now, replied Isabella. But do you really plan to send all the civilians to battle against the demons? Millions of people would completely exhaust all of Hermes's resources. Also what? Also we might not win. She shook her head. There are so many people that they'll cause trouble no matter where we place them. Not to mention, their days are numbered after they eat the first pill, so what if the demons don't attack us in time? If we feed too few, then they're useless. If we feed too many, we might waste them. Even if the demons all attack at once and are defeated by the crazed army, these people won't be able to fight anymore. You don't understand. Zero stood up, walked over to a large table, and lifted the cover off of it, revealing a map of the wild places. I never planned to use the crazed army to protect Hermes, and the location for the final battle should be somewhere on the fertile plains. I think it'll probably take place at the ruins of the holy city of Tequila, since it's closest to us. She pointed at a spot on the map. Do you want to initiate an attack? Isabella froze in shock. We're desperately lacking time, said Zero calmly. I've never dreamed of completely wiping out the demons. The Holy Book says that only when the bloody moon arrives and the gates of hell open can the demons build a black spire. Actually, the spire isn't built, it grows. Are you saying that those stones are actually alive? Isabella asked in disbelief. This information can only be found in the personal notes of the Union's 3 chiefs. The demon's expansion depends on the black spire's ability to produce red mist, and currently spires are founded in areas with many godstone mineral veins, so their range of influence will continue to grow. In the beginning of the Second Battle of Divine Will, an extraordinary once led a division of soldiers to approach the red mist area underground, and they found a startling sight. An enormous monster was writhing under the spire, and its body was even larger than the Tequila Tower itself, Zero said slowly. That enormous monster was decomposing God's stone and turning it into black crystals, which gave off red mist. Considering the demons had chaos beasts that turned God's stones into magic stones, it wasn't difficult to comprehend that they also had this kind of ability. Isabella opened her mouth and finally spat. That's disgusting. Unfortunately, once the spire is formed, small surprise attacks will be ineffective, so our best bet is to attack them directly. I don't know how long it takes for the decomposed god stone to grow out of the ground, but it probably doesn't happen overnight. During this time, demons can only transport red mist from their backup resources, so they'll have very limited strength. We need to use a crazed army that is large enough to defeat the demons to create a path, so the god's punishment army can kill the underground monster, said Zero with great conviction. If we're lucky enough, we'll buy ourselves another 400 years. Chapter 483, The Distance to God, Part 1. Isabella stared at the map in silence for a while. But the crazed soldiers aren't God's punishment warriors. Although the pills can affect their resolve, it won't give them unbreakable resolve. In front of truly terrifying enemies, they'll still be afraid and may even run away. Millions of defecting soldiers are enough to run us all over into dust. Obviously, it won't be that simple. It would be best if the crazed army mostly consists of the church's lower-level believers, and if the judgment army was the core. Zero returned to the window. And if we want these many believers, we must unite the 4 kingdoms. What are our chances of winning? 30%? 50%, she replied nonchalantly. How can I know what our chances of winning are? After all, we've never fought against them and can only get the information through ancient books from 400 years ago. Don't forget what I said before, if we're lucky enough. This was exactly why it was so exciting. She was putting the fate of all mankind at stake and placing the few bargaining chips she had all in one basket by fighting the strong with the weak. In a battle where the odds were against them, an unexpected triumph would be all the more sweeter. The continuation of mankind will depend on their courage, wisdom, faith, and sacrifice in this battle, she thought. This is probably what God hopes to see. Cowards can't earn his smile. I hope you're right. Isabella frowned. I'm feeling more curious now. Curious about what? If Prince Roland of the Kingdom of Grey Castle was standing here, what would he do? Zero furrowed her brows. Why? Do you think he can beat me? Bishop Tayfun said that he hasn't heard from the pure which he sent to the Kingdom of Grey Castle yet, as if she simply disappeared. She was the one you assigned on the mission to check out the western region. Besides her, we also lost Afra from King's City, the bishop candidate Mira, and the church in Longsong Stronghold. Isabella paused for a bit. Don't you think since the church began targeting the 4 kingdoms, we've never suffered so many losses before? It's as if after we got involved with the western region, we have been losing. It's like God is protecting him. Enough. Zero slammed her fist on the table. You know nothing about God. Isabella was slightly shocked. I was only kidding. Since when did you care so much about God? Zero tried to repress her anger. He's merely a mortal. Mortals can only rely on calculations and knowledge, and this will all become part of me. Even though he has ways to fight the demons, the Union will definitely do better. Zero turned around and stared at Isabella. When the church's troops march into the Kingdom of Grey Castle, you'll know who really has God's blessing. As Isabella left the library, she sighed and said, You're becoming more and more like a Pope. Zero sat silently next to the table, her emotions in tumult for a long time, which was uncommon throughout her 200 years of life. She knew what Isabella meant, but she could not explain herself to her. No matter who was Pope, no matter what ideas they had before, as soon as they stepped into the prayer room, they would all undergo unpredictable changes. God really exists. Zero realized that her thoughts had been completely disturbed, so she closed her book and walked to the top floor of the library. It was the highest point of the pivotal secret temple where the prayer room was. Zero pushed open a secret door made out of bookshelves, walked up a narrow stone staircase, and entered a windowless room. The room was only a few square feet, not even enough for someone to lie down in. The roof was cone-shaped and encrusted with magic stones that gave off a faint blue light. Under the dim lighting, Zero could vaguely see the 4 walls and hard ground. Besides these, there was nothing in the room, and it was hard to believe that this stuffy and cramped place was the closest location to God. Zero closed her eyes to feel his summoning. Her dark world slowly began to change, as if something entered her mind and displayed a scene in her consciousness. She knew that this wasn't a figment of her imagination. Even her soul, which had absorbed hundreds of people, could not see or even imagine such a sight. When the twisting lines slowed down, 5 large paintings appeared in the expansive world. One floated above her head in a giant ring, and the other 4 lined up symmetrically in a cross next to her. This was a sign from God. Watching something in her mind was an incredible feeling. Zero knew that this entire scene would disappear as soon as she opened her eyes, so she could only use her consciousness to view every painting. When she was focused on the paintings, she felt being brought into them. The large ring-shaped painting on top of her was undoubtedly God himself. It was a dark world with no visible boundaries, and a giant red sphere was suspended in the middle. The sphere was made of magic power, and she could feel its infinite power from simply looking at it. Half of it seemed to be cut off by a knife or hidden in darkness, so only half could be seen. The more closely Zero looked at it, the surer she was of her judgment. It was just too majestic. She was nothing compared to this ball of magic power. She could not even find the words to describe how giant it was, only that even the world under her was dwarfed by this red sphere. The swirls of magic power on its surface were even wider than the ocean, and the light of the shining magic power was even brighter than the sun. Besides God, who else could have such vast powers? This was probably the bloody moon recorded in the Holy Book. From the side, the half-sphere truly did not look like a full moon. Zero once tried to pray to it, but it did not respond and only floated calmly in the darkness as if it was waiting for the results of the battle of divine will. This was why she was extremely enraged by Isabella's words. This thing did not give anyone its blessing. She realized after witnessing it in person that humans were insignificant in God's eyes. After she separated from her thoughts, Zero looked towards the 4 paintings at the bottom. She believed that the reason the battles that occurred every 400 years were called Battle of Divine Will had something to do with the content of these paintings. The Church's secret history recorded past Union leaders and popes' interpretations of the paintings, and most of them came to the same conclusion: the location of the ending of the war was in these 4 paintings. Chapter 484, The Distance to God, Part 2. The first painting had the richest contents. It depicted a throne constructed with swords and bones, and blood-red long windows and tall black columns were behind it. It seemed to be a part of a palace. If she completely submerged her consciousness into it, she could even see the city outside the window with endless spires. What caught her attention the most was the stone gate that peeked through the city. If the spires around it were the buildings of Hermes' residence, then the stone gates at least 5 times as tall as the Church's Tower of Babel, which completely went against common sense. What was more unbelievable was that the inside of the gates was black, as if a large and smooth cloth was covering its middle. However, as she looked closely, there seemed to be an immeasurable depth to the darkness. The more she stared at it, the more uneasy she felt. Zero only focused her attention on the window for a while and soon turned it to the throne. She did not see the Lord of the Throne today. The things she saw in her mind would sometimes change. For example, she could occasionally see an armored warrior sitting on the throne, his head covered with a frightening black helmet, only revealing a faint red light through his eye sockets. However, this was not very common, and the throne was usually empty. According to the records of secret history, this painting depicted the city where the demons originated from and first appeared, the northwestern corner of Land of Dawn. Zero agreed with this theory. The painting's blood-red colors and black spires were very similar to the demons' living environments, and the helmet of the owner of the throne had a distinct demonic style. The only strange part was that its body was exactly like that of a regular human, and not like the strong and horrific bodies of the fearsome demons or lords of hell recorded in the Holy Book. Thus, there were many speculations about its identity. Some popes believed that it was the source of evil, while other witches thought that it was a member of the demons that guarded the secrets of God. The second painting was much more mysterious. It had few contents, which seemed to keep moving. At least in Zero's limited number of observations, she had never seen the same scene twice. This time, she saw water. The light blue water rippled backward against 3 large skeletons, which were completely hollow inside, but the water was somehow held outside the bones by an invisible barrier. It was as if the giant skeletons were keels supporting the side ports, and she felt like she was in a boat and looking out through the window, except these windows spanned the entire wall. Zero was quickly enthralled by the strange scenery in front of her. She was standing at the border between water and sky, with half of her underwater, and the other half floating above. She could see the bright sunlight and sparse clouds above her, but her legs were encased in water. Under the sun, she could clearly see the color of the water changing from light blue on the surface to bright green, and then dark green, as it went deeper and deeper. Suddenly, the scene began to shake, and Zero felt the world tremble below her and almost fell over. She subconsciously tried to open her eyes but stopped herself at the last second. This isn't reality, she told herself. This is God giving you a sign. The water was quickly rising and almost drowned out the sky. Or, perhaps the water was not rising, but she was sinking downwards. Soon, everything outside the window was covered by water, and she even saw red fish swimming by the skeletons. First, there were only a few of them, but then there were more and more, and the dense schools of fish surrounded the invisible barrier like a red ribbon. The water gradually changed from dark green to a dull black, until the scene was shrouded in a complete darkness and totally disappeared. Zero broke out of the painting, panting. This was the first time she experienced such a clear vision, and when the darkness covered her eyesight, she felt like she was about to choke. However, she did not find any useful clues. According to the secret history, the contents of the second painting were always changing. Some recorded seeing a giant eyeball, others saw a volcano spewing bubbles and yellow smoke, and others saw a bottomless abyss giving off a faint light. No observers had ever seen the same thing. She rested for a while and turned her attention to the third painting. However, there was still nothing in it. It was like the world outside the frame, dark and dead silent. The secret history mentioned that in the beginning of the first battle of divine will, there was something in the painting, but this recording was so ancient that its pages were tattered and basically illegible. However, she was certain that 100 years after the battle of divine will, this painting turned black and never showed anything ever again. The fourth painting was not at all mentioned in the secret history. It was difficult for Zero to understand, as if they were all in agreement to hide something. If even the sole messenger of secrets, the Pope, did not have the right to know, then the secret would be unknown to everyone forever. The painting depicted a wall. It was an unassuming rough gray stone wall. Parts of the gray paint were chipped off, revealing the cracked stone blocks under it. It had obviously stood here for a long time. Besides this wall, there was nothing else. After staying in the painting for a while, Zero started to feel exhausted. Reading God's signs took a lot of energy, and even she could not do it for a long time. Zero opened her eyes to disconnect from the sphere of magic power, causing the dark world and giant paintings to disappear, and she was back in the dim small room. She sighed deeply and stumbled down the stairs, only recovering after drinking off her cold black tea in the library. Although God did not give her any response, her anger before was completely calmed. Isabella knows nothing about God, but I do. Zero looked out the window at the busy figures under the tower, and her feeling of control returned. Her experiences during the past 200 years made her disregard everything in this world, but after she became the Pope, she realized that she had only scratched the surface in understanding the world. Now, she faced a whole new mystery, and her immortality was perfect for solving it. Zero felt in her heart that she was the real person chosen by God. If she could approach God, it was worth the 400 years wait, even thousands of years. Chapter 485, The Day of Leaving. Here comes the ship. A sail peeked over the end of the light gray horizon. There were no other merchant ships around, so it had to be a ship from Sleeping Island. Tilly gently replied, her voice muffled by the sounds of the sea washing onto the shoals. She had turned her back to Roland, so he could not see her face. We're leaving now, Andrea said regrettably. I really liked your domain, and I've no idea if I can make the same delicious ice cream bread as you have here when I'm back at Sleeping Island. Along with a bolt rifle, Roland had given her the ice cream recipe as well. As long as you have eggs and milk, it won't taste too bad. When you come back to Border Town, no, City of Neverwinter next time, I'll have more delicious food for you. Will it be even tastier than ice cream? Andrea held her stray hair and said with a laugh, "You'd better not lie to me. I have your word. If you're reluctant to leave, you could stay here." Ashes laid out her hands and said, "Princess Tilly definitely won't mind leaving such a gluttonous witch like you behind. You won't be allowed to eat as much as you want on Sleeping Island." "Is that true? I won't give you any ice cream when we get back." Andrea stared at her. "You should just eat your dried fish and drink your fishy soup every day." As they continued to bicker, the sailboat neared the coast. The flying pink flag on the top of the mast told everyone it was the Charming Beauty. Shavy summoned the invisible barrier, which allowed her to travel and move between the shoal and the ship, enabling her to carry all the books, goods, and materials to the ship, without docking. Then, she carried the card-playing Three and Princess Tilly, but as Tilly was stepping into the barrier, Roland called her name. "What?" She turned her head, her eyes revealing a complex mixture of emotions. Roland was not good at saying goodbye and had stopped her without forethought. He took a deep breath and shouted, "If you have any problems on Sleeping Island, you can tell me. I'll do my best to help you. And remember that you're always welcome in the City of Neverwinter." Tilly smiled after a moment. "Thank you, and you too. Goodbye, everyone." Andrea and Shabby shouted while waving their hands. Ashes did not say anything and just waved her hand too. After their farewell, the barrier carried the witches to the Charming Beauty quickly. "What's wrong? You don't want them to leave?" Nightingale asked from behind him. "I just think it's a pity. There are 300 witches. It would be wonderful if they all moved to the western region," said Roland with a fake casualness. "Yeah, and then you'd feel even more guilty." Nightingale rolled her eyes at him. "Guilty?" Roland felt terrified and asked. "Why? Living here is better than living on Sleeping Island, isn't it?" Anna was also confused. "You wouldn't understand, even if I told you." Nightingale turned around and walked towards the hot air balloon. "And that's the most irritating part." Watching her walk away, Roland felt a sense of relief. Nightingale had disappeared for the last 2 days, and now she was finally back to normal, so he had nothing to worry about. "Let's go. There are a lot of things for us to do," Wendy said while smiling. "Okay." Roland and Anna smiled and walked to Cloud Gazer while holding hands. Back in his office, Roland opened his notebook and thought about how he would develop his domain in the coming year. Undoubtedly, there were 2 things of the utmost importance that needed addressing. The first thing to do was to dethrone Timothy and stop him from diminishing the countrymen with the berserk pills. This could also greatly expand Roland's reputation and prepare everyone for the unification of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. The second was to absorb Longsong's stronghold as soon as possible to put the City of Neverwinter on the track for construction. Iron Axe, Carter, Theo in King's City, and he had already discussed the former many times, and they decided to launch the spring offensive at the end of April, which would be at the end of this month. It was the plowing time in many cities, which would not affect the professional First Army, but would affect the traditional noble, because people would be constrained by their crops and unwilling to start a war at the risk of starvation. If the army suddenly appeared at the outskirts of King's City, Timothy would be totally unprepared. The steam engine plant, ammunition factory, and concrete boat plant were all busy producing resources for battle. Meanwhile, logistics operations were at full speed. Plus the city hall boasted enough manpower, and the First Army was experienced in battles. Roland had a good grasp on the necessary resources and their deployment, so he was not worried at all about either. The most important thing at the moment was to utilize the resources of Stronghold. Thinking of this, Roland told Barav to come to his office. "Have you catalogued all of the industries in Longsong Stronghold and its surrounding territories?" Barav pulled out a notebook. "It's all in here, Your Highness." The primary income was from the mining industry and salt industry, especially the former, There was a high-quality gem mine to the west of Longsong stronghold near the impassable mountain range, whose output accounted for more than half of the stronghold's income. Gem mine? Roland was not interested in luxuries. Isn't there also a gem mine in the North Slope mine? Why did that town appear so poorly last time I visited? It's not the same, Your Highness. Bhairav rubbed his hands and said, the gems of the North Slope mine are the byproducts of other mineral veins, so the quantity is very small, and they might not even be good enough to be made into jewelry when they're cut. But the gem mine in Stronghold is full of colorful stones on the prism, and each of them can easily be made into a high-quality multicolored stone. The gems are worth dozens of gold royals once sold in King's City, and the output and quality are far better than that of the gems from the North Slope mine. A multicolored stone? Roland asked curiously, what does it look like? It's generally transparent and has no fixed color. It reflects many different colors under the sunlight, from light green to orange-red, and it shows multiple colors after being cut. It's more like crystallized sunlight than a normal ruby or sapphire. Bhairav paused. The multicolored stone of the Kingdom of Grey Castle, the ice stone of the Kingdom of Everwinter and the luminary stone of the Kingdom of Dawn are the most popular gems among the noble. That gem sounded pretty luxurious. Roland thought. Maybe it could be used to make a ring for Anna. But, the gem mine has little value when talking about the improvement of people's livelihood. Roland asked, any other mineral resources? The Maple family and the Wild Rose family each have an iron ore mine, Bhairav said, but they're both smaller than the North Slope mine. The domains of the two families are both surrounded by the impassable mountain range. These mountains crossing the four kingdoms may be full of treasure, Roland thought. Maybe I can explore along the foot of the mountain with Sylvie to find an ore reserve for the city of Neverwinter. After all, steel is a powerful resource for industrial manufacturing. Chapter 486, A Call for Help. What about the salt industry? There were many ore resources in the western region, so it was not surprising that mining was the primary industry of Stronghold. However, this was the first mention of the salt industry, and Prince Roland had no knowledge of local specialties. In Roland's opinion, salt should be the main industry in coastal cities. Stronghold, the Elk family, and the Honeysuckle family each have one salt well. In fact, the three salt wells are very close to each other and basically located on the borders of their domains. I heard that over 200 years ago, civil wars in the western region often happened there and lasted for 50 years. Bhairav stroked his mustache. Roland wondered if the three nobilities occupying the area had then become the biggest winners. He asked with great interest, what's the output of these salt wells? Besides supplying the western region, the salt was also sold to Fallen Dragon Ridge, Redwater City, and some other small villages along the way. Bhairav leafed through his notebook. It accounted for almost 15% of the stronghold income. Why such a low percentage? Roland asked in surprise. The market price for salt isn't low. It's too hard to get the salt out of the deep pit. Bhairav shook his head. I know a nobleman in Silver City who has a salt well in his domain. It's about the size of a human head and too small for a cask. People mine it by putting water in and scooping it up with a bamboo stick after the salt melts. Why not expand the well? Bhairav smiled smugly. Your Highness, the salt bed is too deep. If we dig it like a water well, its walls will collapse. According to him, the salt well has been mined from his grandfather's generation, and now the well is as deep as a belfry in King's City. I see, Roland thought. Limited by the depth, people here mined salt wells using the brine method, but the process could be improved. Lifting the salt mine with Lotus's power or extracting the brine with a steam engine would be more efficient. An abundant salt supply would not only bring great profits to the city of Neverwinter, but also popularize healthier and more delicious food to the subjects. The salt they had at present was crude and saline with all kinds of impurities and foreign substance. I see. At this thought, the prince nodded with satisfaction. You can go now. Don't forget to do population expansion work. The months of demons just passed, so it's a good time to recruit before refugees starve without their crops. I had the same thought, Your Highness, Barrow said with his hand on his chest. The new emissary delegation will leave soon, and I think they will gain more than last year. After the chief left, Roland was about to plan how to deal with the stronghold resources, when he heard a knocking on the window. He turned his head and found a grey falcon lying on the window grill with a note on its foot. Nightingale opened the window and let the flying messenger in. It was a letter from Petrov Hall in Longsong. Roland read the letter quickly and could not help but laugh. After Nightingale came back to border area with him, it had been difficult to continue the fight against crime. They received all kinds of reports from the masses, and it was difficult to identify what was true, and what had been made up for the cash reward. Less than half of the rats had applied for jobs. The new Minister of Justice, René Med, was busy all day long and could not control the Blackstreet forces. If it went on like this, public safety would deteriorate. Petrov had written at the end of the letter that he wanted the prince to help him with manpower and technology, but Roland knew he actually wanted Nightingale and Vader to help the Earl of the Elk family. He gave the letter to Nightingale. She glanced at it and said, "They can't hold Stronghold anymore?" The former raging fire was just a response to the war among the masses. He has no experience in battling or capturing the rats. Roland smiled and said, "As I expected, they have a long way to go in fighting the rats, and there'll be many relapses. But they'll eventually be destroyed with powerful measures and given a better way of life. Once they're on the right track, it'll be hard to stray into evil again. This is the case for both people and cities." "Do you want me to go?" Nightingale sighed. "Don't forget that Longsong and Border Town are one city now. Don't separate them from each other." He shrugged. "I said at the expansion meeting that there'll be a day when we could have breakfast in border area and work in Longsong area half an hour later. And you are in charge of the security bureau. You are expected to travel between the two places and inspect the work. If I go, what will protect you?" She shook her head. "Don't tell me there'll be no danger. You are the thorn in Timothy and the church's side, and only I can stop assassin witches." Roland wanted to say that he had the God's stone of retaliation and would not be hurt by a normal witch, but he realized that was not what she was worried about. "Listen to me," she cut in, "you can't make me promise anything, and Wendy and Scroll will agree with me. You're the most important person in the Witch Union. I'll go with you." "Ahem, really?" Nightingale choked in shock and turned her head to avoid his gaze. "I guess I'm the only one who can help them." The prince could not help but laugh. "Take Summer with you. It's time for her to practice. And Sylvie and Soraya should go too to establish the identification systems while checking out the mines, and maybe even build up the city hall," he thought. "I wonder how the training of the nobility in Longsong Stronghold is going." 3 days later, Roland boarded with the witches and the nobility in Stronghold to go to Longsong area. Looking at the cement paddle steamer and the coal cinder in the deck seams in the Redwater River, he sighed. It seemed impossible to reach Longsong Stronghold in one day. This speed was still too slow for him. After all, time was money. Roland planned to build an exclusive luxury high-speed ship. Chapter 487, The Guarding Shield. By dusk, the ship reached the port of the inland river near Longsong Stronghold. Petrov had heard about their trip and greeted them at the port with his followers. When they returned the castle, a grand welcoming banquet awaited them in the hall of the first floor. After taking over Longsong Stronghold, something changed in Roland's heart. When watching the nobles giving toasts to each other, he felt the money spent on the banquet came out of his own pocket. After briefly greeted the eldest son of the Honeysuckle family, he cut to the chase. "Have the rats come out again?" "Judging from the reports we received, it seems so." Petrov made a gesture to guide the prince to a corner of the hall. "Compared with the former organized Blackstreet groups, the criminals we recently arrested mostly acted individually, such as thieves, burglars, and murderers, all of whom were pulled to the square to be hung. Since you asked us to judge with adequate proof, the criminals we executed were only a small portion of all the reported criminals. Verifying the information in hand took quite some time. Besides, the eldest son of the Honeysuckle family paused. We're in a great trouble recently. What is it? Someone openly resisted your policies, Your Highness, Petrov said in a worried tone. Earl Med knows more about it. I'll ask him to tell you in detail. Your Highness, the Elk family greets you. After being summoned, Renee came and bowed to the prince, and then he began to tell the whole story. Recently, something serious happened in North Street of the outer town. Sheriff Vader would call it a serial killing case. It's actually what I would call it. This triggered Roland's interests. Carry on. Yes, Renee Med said in a serious voice. Since 3 days ago, a resident has been found dead at home every night. The victims were all male, lived alone, had no families, and most importantly, they applied for jobs in the city hall. The prince frowned. Were they regular employees? If handymen can be counted as full-time job, then yes. The Earl of the Elk family nodded. In the room of each victim, there was a painting drawn with blood, a crown and a cross. Because of the identical mark, I sought confirmation from the city hall and then found all the victims were among the list of people who were about to be sent to the Redriver district to build houses. You think their intention is to sabotage your enrollment plan, Your Highness, Renee replied. Rumors have been spreading in North Street saying that whoever applies for a job in the city hall will be a target for killers. I believe that's what's happening. Petrov chimed. We've employed less than we'd expected, and there are barely any applicants from North Street. Moreover, there are applicants who regret applying and say that they're physically unfit for going out of town and hope that the officials can take their names off the city hall's enrollment list. Now, the rumor is only spread in North Street, but if it goes as far as other blocks, it could sabotage your construction plan. Roland contemplated for a moment. Have you got any clues about the suspect? Renee opened his mouth and said after a while, there were no witnesses to the crimes, so we've no idea where to start the searching. Really? Roland felt surprised. How did you solve such cases on previous occasions? Do you mean the patrol team? The young Earl of the Elk family hesitated for a while. As far as I know, they didn't have standard handling methods. If it was an influential case where the families of the victim appealed to the Lord, and the Lord decided to show his subjects justice, he would pressure the Blackstreet gangsters and order the rats to hand over the criminal. The patrol team didn't care if the person they handed over was only a scapegoat or not. If the victim was only a foreigner or lived alone, the patrol team would usually ignore it. This is outrageous. Roland was shocked. The patrol party's way of handling such cases is equal to handing over the jurisdiction to the rats. No wonder people were saying that rats were the other party who ruled the city. Besides, in this era, there seems to be no such a thing as a criminal investigation, so if there's no witness in a murder case, it'll most likely become suspended. Of course, that's only the case for civilians. Border Town has always been under Nightingale's supervision, plus it has a simple population composition, so all the crimes here are instantly cracked, which led to my neglect of this matter. Although Renee didn't say so, he might think that my request of a verdict on verified evidence is too demanding. But no matter what, I won't allow the using of scapegoats in my territory. I see. From tomorrow on, the Security Bureau will take over this case, and all you need to do is to cooperate. Yes. Thank you, Your Highness, Renee said joyfully. After the banquet, Roland returned to his study on the top floor of the castle. The interior of the study looked very different now. The bookshelves around the walls were all torn down, and a soft couch, a tea table, and cushions were added. Behind the desk, the wall was knocked open, and 2 French windows were installed. Although they were not made of crystal glass, they greatly expanded the view of the room. Through the slightly tinted glass, Roland overlooked Stronghold, enveloped in darkness, and nodded with satisfaction. It seems Petrov followed my orders with great care, which means my choosing him as my deputy was a wise decision. How do you plan to handle this? Nightingale emerged from the mist sitting on the desk with her legs crossed. I'm not planning to handle it at all. The prince smiled, shaking his head. Now that all the nobles have returned to Longsong, tomorrow the primary work is to have them establish the secondary city hall, divide them into departments, and place some people in charge. The sooner the structure is established, the earlier Soraya can draw identification cards. You'll be the one in charge of fighting crimes. Me? You're the head of the security bureau, so it's totally up to you to decide how to solve a case. The whole police department of the city of Neverwinter is in your command, both Vader and Renee are your subordinates. But didn't you always say that the authority of the departments should be separated, and administrative status should be equal? Nightingale felt bewildered. I don't understand how the city hall operates, but this arrangement seems to put the security bureau above the city hall. Territorial security is top priority, which is exactly why you report directly to me, Roland said affirmatively. Not only for the police department, but all the examination work for the city hall and the army will be carried out by you. Indeed, each department should be separated and not interfere with one another, but there needs a web that binds them together and stops power abuse and corruption. It'll prevent the collapse of the new system from within. You must have heard the saying, the firmest defense collapses from within. He paused for a while, looking into Nightingale's eyes. You're the most powerful shield to prevent all these things from happening. Now, both my personal safety and the security of the territory are in your hands. Chapter 488, The Breeding Ground for Evil. We're going to catch all the criminals and stop them from perpetrating in the city of Neverwinter. Nightingale held onto Summer's shoulder and said loudly. Yes. Lady Nightingale. Summer then shrank back. But it's time to go to sleep. It's still early. Let's talk about the countermeasures for tomorrow. Her eyes were sparkling. No one can escape our hunting, not even the most cunning rat. Right, you can call me sister instead. Yes. Sister Nightingale. Oh, my God, Summer did not understand, why as an ordinary townsman, she had to catch criminals. Wasn't it the patrol party's job? Plus, Lady Nightingale, no, Sister Nightingale had been so excited since she had returned from the prince's office. She had been saying, catching criminals over and over again. She's really a witch who hates evils as she does her own enemies. Summer said to herself. But can I really help her? As Summer thought about this, she asked cautiously. What shall we do? I've never caught a criminal. It's my job to catch the criminals, Nightingale patted her chest proudly and said, and, you only need to rebuild the crime scene to show us who the murder was. You mean the exact moment of the killing? Summer hesitated and continued, but, how can I know when exactly the killer did it? Nightingale paused. You're right. How often can you use your ability? I practiced with Sister Wendy for a week and 4 times is the limit now. I think that's the best I can do, Summer said with frustration. My magic power is very limited and if the illusion lasts a little longer, the number of uses will decrease. Besides, I cannot rebuild a scene from 2 days earlier, otherwise, the magic power will run out very fast. How long can the illusion last? Half a quarter. That's rather short. Nightingale paced to and fro at the bedside. It'll be troublesome if the flashback doesn't reveal the criminal. She meditated for a few minutes. If you reduce the lasting time of each illusion, can you try a few more times? Maybe I can, but I'm not sure, Summer murmured. Sister Wendy told me if I could control the magic power accurately, I would be able to control the length of time. But every time I summon my power, I always feel the magic waning quickly. It's such a pity Countess Spear isn't here, Nightingale said with a regretful look. Anyway, let's deduce a time and take a chance. Take a chance? Yes. Nightingale said, laughing. I'm always pretty lucky, otherwise, I wouldn't ever have met Prince Roland. She suddenly became sad at these words. If only it could have been a few days earlier. How could that be considered as lucky? Summer shouted in her mind. Anyway, luck is unreliable. My ability won't work even a few hours later, let alone days. Can we really catch criminals tomorrow? Well, now go to sleep. Nightingale blew out the candles and darkness soon enveloped the room. Summer answered and climbed onto the big bed. The soft bedding covered her immediately. God, this is the bed of a noble? It's too comfortable. Summer buried her head into the clean pillow and felt her body sinking into the bed. She stretched her body and quickly started to fall asleep. Do all the witches in the castle sleep with such comfortable bedding? If I slept on such a bed, I wouldn't ever feel like getting up again. She could hear Nightingale mumbling while she was trying to fall asleep. I'm his shield. And then Summer fell asleep. Early the next morning, she was woken up by Nightingale. Hurry up. We ought to go, Nightingale said energetically. Yes. Summer struggled to get off the bed, put on her coat, and went downstairs with Nightingale. In the lobby, there was a tall man with brown hair pacing back and forth. When he saw them, he stepped forward and said with a bow, "Good morning. I'm Rene Med, the Earl of the Elk family. I've been waiting for you. You must be Lady Nightingale, and this is Summer, she's my assistant." Nightingale raised her head a little. She's a witch, too. Is that so? He looked a little surprised but quickly nodded at Summer. That's great. The criminals will have nowhere to go if I get your help. Where's your staff? They're all waiting outside the castle. Very well. Ask them to wait a little while longer, I haven't had my breakfast yet. Of course, please take your time. Summer fixed her eyes on them until Nightingale turned into the dining room. She hurried to follow at her heels. God, is this Sister Nightingale? She hadn't seen Sister Nightingale so dignified and serious. No, not exactly. She's so supercilious, as if she were a noble. That's definitely not something to be expected from a civilian. Besides, the man is an earl. In Valencia, the young earl would be the perfect lover in every woman's eyes. If I were Sister Nightingale, I'd be too nervous to say a word. But Sister Nightingale seemed not care about this and kept him waiting for her. Is this all right? Summer asked with concerns. Take it easy. His Highness told me that a noble is just a title in his territory and even the earl won't devour you. Nightingale smiled. Besides, Security Bureau is superior to the City Hall and I'm his boss. Why can't I make him wait for me? Summer felt the woman was suddenly beyond her reach. After breakfast, they left the castle to investigate the scene of the murder. Last night, another victim died at home. This time, however, it was on the corner of North Street and West Street. It is the fourth one. Nightingale frowned. And the murderer is moving to the west. It shows the killer realized the propagating effect of committing crimes only in a specific block was unsatisfactory, Renee nodded. After all, the Rats organization no longer exists. Walking not too far down a muddy alley, the leading police officer stopped at a tumble-down cabin. Sir, it's here. Summer walked into the cabin after Nightingale and her heart skipped a beat. A man was lying on the floor with his neck cut open and his vital fluid everywhere. There was a crossed crown on the wall facing the door and the heavy, metallic smell of blood filled the room. Ugh, she had to cover her mouth to prevent herself from throwing up. Chapter 489, Tracking Down the Criminal. Is this the first time you've witnessed a scene like this? Renee came up to her, looking quite concerned. Perhaps it'll be better if you go outside and get some fresh air. No. No, thanks. Seeing Nightingale squatting by the body examining the wounds, Summer declined the offer. If Nightingale was still able to keep her composure at such a horrible crime scene, she must also stay here. Summer continued, I feel much better now. When was he found? Nightingale turned questioning. Early this morning. The residents nearby found his body when they went to draw water. It was before sunrise. The door was left wide open as it is now, as if the killer wanted to announce the death to the whole community. Renee answered. In the past, it would take 2 or 3 days for us to hear about something like this. The City Hall has been offering rewards for information, so it was reported sooner. Do you know the victim's identity? Shovel, Freeman. Renee glanced about the room. Nothing valuable has been found. It looks like he used to be a rat, too. Did anyone see him last night? I checked. Nobody. Any noises heard? None. It doesn't sound right, a strong man like him? Nightingale frowned. Even if his throat was slit, he wouldn't die immediately. Someone should have heard him struggling for life or banging on the floor. Are you sure they weren't lying? I don't think so, Renee replied hesitantly. The murder has sparked panic among the community. Plus, the residents get rewards for assisting the police. They shouldn't have any reason to lie. Well, bring them here. I'll interview them myself. And, Summer? Nightingale looked toward her assistant. Yes? Summer responded with a shiver. Go to the castle and bring Soraya here. Sure. Summer staggered out and ran toward the castle. Somehow, she found the way in which Nightingale gave commands utterly beautiful. Everything about her character demonstrated great confidence. No wonder His Highness trusted her with the security bureau. When Summer came back, there were another 2 people following her. Why didn't His Highness ask me to deal with such matters? Lightning flew into the room, exclaiming. He's unfair. Coo, coo. Maggie rejoined. I couldn't stop them, Summer said timidly. Shouldn't you protect Prince Roland while I'm away? Nightingale's brows went up a fraction of an inch. This isn't an adventure game. Relax. Sylvie's there, nobody can easily approach His Highness, Lightning winked. Besides, His Highness is going to call a meeting with the nobles and there'll be no danger in the castle hall. How incredible, thought Summer. How could these 2 girls act so airily at such a horrendous crime scene? Especially Lightning. She was several years younger, and her eyes were sparkling with excitement. What on earth had they been through since becoming witches? Who are these? Renee and the other policemen stared at the girl and the bird, eyes wide open. They're witches. Nightingale grumbled. Anyway, you ought to get back to the castle before the end of the meeting. Got it? Lightning pouted. You wanted me to draw the body? Soraya was the last to enter the room. Summer felt slightly relieved when she noticed Soraya looking as ghastly pale as herself. Not the body, the murderer. Nightingale closed the door and disclosed the plan. Once we've got a picture of the killer, we'll post it on the bulletin boards at the square and offer cash rewards to people who provide tips. This should be the fastest way to find him. The Earl of the Elk family gasped. You mean the witch here, Miss Summer, can reconstruct the crime scene? It depends. She can maintain the illusion for only a limited period of time, so we also need a bit of luck. You'll see. Nightingale gave Summer a nod of approval. Go ahead. Okay. Summer shut her eyes and traced time back to somewhere between midnight and dawn as Nightingale instructed. In the darkness, her magic power streamed from the tips of her fingers and intertwined, gradually forming a clear image. Slowly, some wooden planks, a bed, a table and a room took shape. A house was constructed in her mind. The victim was lying on the floor, his blood running onto the bumpy ground. The previously locked door was pushed open. Is this the witch's power? It's unbelievable. Gracious. The illusion is so lifelike. It's almost like the demon's power. Hush. Shut up. The surrounding police hushed to a whisper. It seems he's already dead. Nightingale patted Summer on her shoulder. Don't waste your magic power. Switch to another time point. The second time, Summer traced the event back to somewhere close to midnight. The figure on the floor disappeared abruptly, and the victim was lying in bed, appearing to be in deep slumber. Does this mean he was killed between the 2 periods of time? Renee asked in bewilderment. Correct. The killer took action between midnight and 3 o'clock this morning. I got it. Miss Summer's power doesn't last long, and we're likely to miss the exact moment the murderer was committing the crime. That's why you said we needed a bit of luck. Precisely, said Nightingale. It likely took a long time for the murderer to leave these marks after he finished the business. Summer, you just start from somewhere close to 3 o'clock. Summer nodded and heaved a heavy breath. She summoned her power again and set the time between 2 and 3. The magic power swarmed toward the wall and revealed a stranger standing at the bedside. He was drawing something on the wall with the bloodstained sheet. It looks like we've found him. Nightingale smiled. Lucky indeed. So this man is the killer, Koo? He looks like nothing special. I thought it would at least be someone stout and strong. Lightning remarked in disappointment. I can only draw a side face from this angle. Soraya looked at the murderer from the wall. Is there any way to turn him around? Summer, I'll leave it to you. Nightingale instructed. All right. Without further explanation from Nightingale, Summer knew what to do. She pushed the time of the last illusion a quarter backward. This time everyone saw clearly what the murderer looked like. He first strangled Shovel to death with a rope, dragged him to the floor and then slit his throat with a dagger. During the whole process, Shovel was sleeping like a log without any signs of struggling. It suddenly struck Renee when he turned and noticed a water tank in the corner of the room. Did he drink Dreamland water? It looks like it. Nightingale nodded. That's why there was no noise. The killer slit his throat just to obtain some blood. The victim had already been dead. My lord. I've seen this man before, said a police officer suddenly. What? Both Nightingale and Renee rested their eyes on him. The police officer paused a moment before continuing. His name is Mons, and he used to be a patroller. I've dealt with him before. Do you know where he lives? Renee pursued. I remember he lives in the inner city. West Street, near the Sheep Tavern. Very well. We don't even need to search him out. It appears God is on our side. Nightingale scoffed. He can't get away with it. Let's go. Yes, my lord. The police shouted in unison. Chapter 490, The Real Target. Upon arriving at the Sheep Tavern, the group promptly obtained Mons' address through inquiry. I'll go in first to take a look. You guys enter from the front door afterwards. Summer, keep an eye on Lightning and Maggie. Don't let them in. Nightingale entered her mist and vanished after delivering the order. In her world of black and white, the lines that constructed everything started to twist and distort. She soon located a crack invisible to the naked eye and glided through the wall effortlessly. The man's abode was as humble as Shovel's. It appeared that Mons had been destitute since losing his job as a patroller. She could see clearly, so she knew that there was no godstone of retaliation in the vicinity. Nightingale soon spotted her target in the bedroom. The man was sound asleep beneath the blanket. His coat hung at the bedside with blood smears still on its sleeves. Nightingale returned to the drawing room to open the door. The police swarmed in. They pushed Mons, who had just woken up with a start, back on the bed and tied him up. Who are you? Let me go. He yelled with horror. You're under arrest for murders. Renee silenced him with 2 loud slaps. How dare you plot against His Highness? It'd be merciful even to have you hanged at the city gate. No, I didn't. You didn't. The slaps turned into punches. After a few muffled sounds, Mons gasped in pain, his mouth full of blood and his front tooth falling out. We saw you murder Shovel last night. Do you think we'll believe your cunning excuses? You used Dreamland water to knock him out. Then, you strangled him to death before cutting his throat to avoid getting blood on you. That was pretty smart, eh? Mons did not say a word, but his eyes were filled with shock and terror. Who gave you the order to kill rats applying for jobs? Who instructed you to draw a crossed crown with blood at the crime scene? Nightingale picked up a glass bottle from the nightstand. It was filled halfway with light blue liquid. Dreamland water isn't cheap, and it isn't easy to get a hold of it now that the gangs have been eradicated. We might exempt you from death penalties if you spit all out. Renee clasped his hands. Otherwise, I'll make you fully understand the consequences of infuriating a noble. Nightingale did not stop his threat, even though she knew the Earl of the Elk family was lying. Like His Highness had said, security was the top priority, and anyone who posed a threat to it should be punished severely. Mons hesitated, more punches landed on him. The knight, who had received professional combat training, hit him between the abdomen and the ribs with just the right amount of strength to inflict excruciating pain, but not enough to cause death. "Mercy! Mercy! I'm sorry, my lord. It was a guy from the inner city, he told me to do it. He'll pay me 4 gold royals for each person I kill. He said by doing this, people will nurse a grudge against the police and think those black uniform guys are incapable of protecting the public. In this way, we can reassemble the patrol party." Mons collapsed. He was not a strong-minded person. A person who stood firm in his spirit would never choose to be a patroller and benefit himself through robbery and pillage, and certainly would not take 4 lives for just a few gold royals. Nightingale believed he had probably never expected to be tracked down by the Ministry of Justice so soon after committing the crime, and definitely never thought he would be found out in a city of 20,000 people in merely 4 days. Mons confessed everything tearfully, smearing blood and snot all over his collar. "I don't know how he found me. Our first meeting was at a tavern. He handed me that bottle of Dreamland water and told me as long as I did what he asked me to, I would get a big chunk of money. I didn't have any savings at the time, and the police had rejected my application. I was feeling bitter and resentful. So, I agreed. The police department will never hire a scumbag like you." Renee coughed out a spit. "Do you know the man's name and identity?" Nightingale questioned. "I don't know." "You're lying." "I really don't know." Nightingale looked toward Renee, who immediately took the hint and delivered a few more punches. "The lady here is a witch. She can tell whether you're lying or not. It's indeed very stupid of you to lie in front of her. Don't test our patience." "No, my lord, I'm just not sure." Mons cried in his shrill voice. "Because he has never told me his name or identity." "What did you mean by not sure?" "I've also wondered why he pays so generously, as he doesn't look like a noble at all. When we met a couple of days ago, I could tell he was in a hurry and his attire looked a little weird too, like he layered one coat on top of another." Mons panted. "But he seemed to wear a uniform inside, and I also saw an emblem shaped like a petal on his collar." "An emblem of a petal?" Nightingale and Renee exchanged a look. "Isn't that the emblem of the honeysuckle family?" "That's why I'm not sure. Everybody knows the Hulls are the Lord's supporters, and they would never plot against Lord Wimbledon," Mons said, hanging his head. "It can't be Petrov, it must be someone else," Renee said firmly. "Since they meet each other on a daily basis, why not set up a trap to catch the guy?" This appeared to be the only feasible way. They would arrest the man when Mons met with him and asked for compensation. By then, everything would be cleared up. Nightingale nodded, but still felt something was missing. Mons wasn't lying, and what he said was all true. What had gone wrong? "Nightingale, are you guys all right?" Lightning shouted from outside. "They've almost finished the meeting, Coo. We have to head back now, Coo." Nightingale had asked Lightning, Maggie, and Summer to wait outside because of the violence that might have occurred during the arrest. A flash crossed her mind when she heard the word meeting from Maggie. His Highness was now in a meeting with the nobles, discussing the details of founding a new city hall. This meant there was not a single guard with the prince to protect him, and the closest one would be outside the hall. If this person was really a member of the Honeysuckle family, he could go straight into the castle and enter the hall on the first floor without raising any suspicion, though he would be forbidden to access the second and third floors, which were exclusive to His Highness. Yet she happened to be away from Prince Roland at this very moment. "Lightning." Nightingale had no time to explain to Renee and Mons. She dashed out of the room and grasped Lightning's shoulders, yelling, "Take me back to the castle now. His Highness might be in danger." "Huh? Okay. Hold on tight." Lightning was very surprised, but she carried Nightingale on her back at once. She did not raise any unnecessary questions and flew straight toward the castle. When she was loaded, she flew much lower but still maintained a speed around 100 kilometers an hour. It would take her only half a minute to reach the destination. Nightingale hoped she was wrong, but felt her terror grow as she further examined the details. The murders started 3 days ago, which was exactly when Petrov's letter for help arrived at the border area. If this man's real purpose was to distract everybody with several murder cases and put Roland in a defenseless and vulnerable position, it would be the worst-case scenario. When they were close to the castle, Nightingale stepped into the mist and entered the hall from the air. Her heart sank when she saw the meeting room in chaos. The nobles seemed to be petrified and were all standing by the wall murmuring. The guards were blocking off the scene. The host seat at the end of the long table, where Prince Roland should have been, was vacant. A man was lying on the floor. Nightingale could not tell whether he was alive or not, but could see his body was covered by the black curtain created by the god stone of retaliation. Chapter 491, An Assassination Story. For a moment, Nightingale felt as if the entire world trembled. As she walked out of the mist, the scene before her eyes regained its usual color. The darkness created by the magic stone also began to dissipate, allowing her heart to stop beating frantically. The man lying on the ground was not Roland, but a guard whom Nightingale had never seen before. He was wearing the standard uniform of the honeysuckle family, and on his chest was a dark red mark which looked like a gunshot wound. "Why are you here?" She heard a familiar voice cry out from beside her. She turned her head and realized that the person speaking was Roland himself. He was surrounded by layers of bodyguards at one corner of the hall, which explained why Nightingale did not notice him when she rushed in. As Nightingale opened her mouth, she realized that her throat was terribly hoarse, while her limbs were cold and numb. Her body felt so feeble that it was as if she had just narrowly survived a disaster. All that she desired to do at that moment was to hug Roland tightly, but she knew that she could not do so as there were other nobles around. Therefore, if she truly wanted to lead the security bureau and protect this territory, she had to avoid acting overly intimate with Roland. Although her brain forbade her from doing so, she entered into the mist and walked up to Roland, cutting through the lines of guards. Then, she hugged him with all of her remaining strength. At once, gasps were heard from the crowd. The onlookers apparently could not understand why a witch appeared out of nowhere and disappeared without saying anything. In the mist, Nightingale held on to the prince with both arms. She tucked her head against his chest and listened attentively to his heartbeat. Perhaps, this was the only way to confirm that it was all just a false alarm. Roland also began to sense what was going on. He clapped his hands and announced, "Everyone shall proceed to the dining hall for lunch first. No one is to leave the castle in the meantime. We'll resume the meeting in the afternoon." When only his guards, as well as Petrov, Sylvie, and Lightning were left in the hall, Roland asked, "Does the murderer have anything to do with this assassination attempt?" When she heard Roland's voice speaking to herself, Nightingale began to calm down gradually. She took a few steps back reluctantly and revealed herself once again, pretending that she did not move towards the prince at all, and replied, "Indeed. When I found out that the person directing the criminal was a guard of the honeysuckle family, I immediately rushed here." She then explained her findings and Mon's confession. "I couldn't tell that the real purpose was to divert our attention in order to create an opportunity to lay hands on you. Thankfully, you're safe." His plan worked until the last step, and he accurately calculated the time that I would arrive, as well as predicted the witch's movements. Roland gave a sigh. "This person is wasted as an assassin." Petrov immediately knelt down on one knee and said, "Your Highness, I really didn't know that he's..." "Stand up. You've said this before, and you know I don't like to punish people," Roland interjected. "But it was no doubt that due to your negligence of duty, there were agents among the castle servants and the outer guard." Petrov opened his mouth to speak, and then lowered his head. "I'm guilty. Find out the identity and background of the assassin. I want to know as soon as possible." "Yes, Your Highness." After the eldest son of the honeysuckle family took his leave, Nightingale inquired about her worries. How was the situation like? Threatening but not dangerous, Roland replied, laughing. Thanks to Sylvie's warning, but then again, the assassin was already at a disadvantage when he chose to do it in the meeting hall. After listening to the prince's account, Nightingale began to understand how the attempt took place, but in reality, it was not as easy as Roland put it. Though weapons were not permitted to bring into the hall, the assassin had concealed a dagger under his clothes, and because he was a castle guard, no one conducted a body check on him before he was allowed in. The assassin's only error was to carry a godstone of retaliation. It was common for the outer guards to adorn magic stones, but in the hall, it appeared particularly prominent. In order not to distract Sylvie, all of the nobles would comply with the request to take off their adornments. Hence, Sylvie noticed the assassin the moment she saw the black cavity, and when he moved towards the prince, she immediately issued a warning. Although Roland described the following scene as simple, Nightingale broke into a cold sweat as she listened to his story. The hall was approximately 20 meters in length and width, and when the assassin heard the warning, he picked up speed and charged towards the main seat of the long table, where his target was sitting. By the time the prince pulled out his revolver and opened its safety lock, the assassin had already struck him on his lower back with the dagger. As someone who had undergone assassination training, Nightingale naturally understood that compared to the chest and head, which a person would protect subconsciously, the waist area was very difficult to protect, and the severe pain that could be inflicted by a single strike might cause the target to lose his ability to resist, enabling the assassin to easily go for the vital blood vessels in the neck next. Luckily, Roland was wearing the protective clothing that Soraya specially made for him. The dagger failed to penetrate its coating and thereby could not prevent Roland's subsequent defensive action. He opened fire at the assassin while the gun was literally pressing on the assassin's chest. The two 12mm caliber bullets fired immediately killed the assassin, causing a loud booming sound which led to a huge commotion in the hall. Nightingale could clearly visualize just how risky this sequence of events was. If His Highness did not manage to open the safety lock in time, or the gun failed to fire off, the consequence would have been unimaginable. Nightingale turned her head and cast a glance at Lightning, who immediately dropped her head as though to acknowledge her mistake. Your Highness, we've figured it out, Petrov re-entered the hall and said. His name's Xiao. He's not a native of the western region, but was formerly one of Duke Ryan's castle guards. Duke Ryan? Roland frowned. Why did you choose someone like that to be your guard? He's just an ordinary guard. At that time every family lost a lot of manpower, and thus I brought in those who weren't so attached to the Duke. This is how it's usually done in Stronghold, Petrov answered cautiously. I believe that it's unlikely that he committed this attempt as revenge for the Duke. He's not lying, Nightingale thought. When a large family fell, apart from the subordinates who were given land and title, the remaining people were perceived by the other families as resources that can be divided. To them, it's simply a change of owner. Because the Honeysuckle family had long surrendered to His Highness, plus the fact that Stronghold was always managed by Petrov, this portion of people was never examined. How many men with a similar background are there? Roland asked. Did you also hire men from the Wild Rose, Maple and Wolf families? There are only 3 or 4 of them in the outer guard, Petrov replied, nodding his head. The servants, citizens, and serfs from the other 3 families were assigned to the Honeysuckle and Elk families. I guarantee that they won't appear in Stronghold. Okay, then I shall not concern myself with them. But remember, in the castle area, even the men of the perimeter garrison must be chosen from your family, understood? As for the inner castle, I'll arrange them myself. Yes, Your Highness. Meanwhile, seal off Xiao's residence. I'll find out the real reason behind his attempt. Roland then turned to look at Lightning. Inform Maggie to fetch Countess Spear here. Chapter 492, Reality and Illusion. As she followed Roland back to his office, Nightingale muttered to him, I failed to protect you. No, you did well, Roland responded, shaking his head. Think, why did the assassin, Xiao, choose the meeting hall of all places? Because he knew that I'm being protected by an extremely powerful witch, and if he didn't trick her away, he wouldn't have a chance. The more arrangements he had to make, the weaker his attack became, and he was ultimately able to strike me with only a tiny dagger. But he nearly succeeded. It can't be considered a success without killing me right there, and your presence served to restrict this possibility. Roland laughed. What would he have done if I didn't have you? He would have waited patiently for a chance to launch a fatal attack. There would be chances as long as he could remain in the castle. This shows that you've already protected me very well. In fact, the safer the territory is, the safer I am as well. These aren't empty words of consolation, Nightingale mused. His Highness seems to really believe so. She felt a warm surge run through her body, and the nagging feelings of remorse allayed considerably. Understood. But you mustn't let Lightning and Maggie off the hook this time. What did they do? When I wasn't around, they should have been by your side to guard against lurking enemies. Nightingale pointed out. Like in today's situation, the assassin wouldn't have been able to hurt you at all if Lightning was there to fly you up. She's just a little more active. That won't do. Wendy and Scroll will definitely agree with me if they're around. If we don't let Lightning and Maggie understand their mistake, things may go wrong the next time when something like this happens. Oh, the prince deliberated briefly while stroking his chin. I got it. I'll punish them by forbidding them to go outside until they complete 3 sets of MPC, mathematics, physics, and chemistry, comprehensive exercises. How does that sound? Nightingale inhaled a mouthful of cold air. Comprehensive exercises, the math section is still okay, but the physics and chemistry sections are even scarier than the basic natural principles. Just the first page alone can make you sleepy, especially those weird formulas and diagrams, which are no different from the incantations in the legends. If it was herself who had to do the exercises, she would likely never be able to go out ever again. Yet, she was the one who came up with the suggestion, and thus she felt that it was inappropriate to take it all back. Hardening her heart, she nodded at Roland and affirmed. Great. This way, they'll surely recognize their mistake. The afternoon meeting proceeded smoothly, with Nightingale staying behind and guarding Roland until it was dusk. The general framework and first batch of candidates for the secondary city hall were finally confirmed. Petrov Hull was appointed as chief executive of the Longsong region. Apart from overseeing the city hall, he was also concurrently Minister of Finance, while his father, Earl Hull, served as Minister of Construction. Therefore, Petrov could be considered one of the biggest winners among the stronghold nobles this time. Even Nightingale gasped silently at this decision. Indeed, His Highness did not place the blame for the assassination attempt on the Honeysuckle family. By the Lord's standards, this could be considered to be a wonderful expression of fairness and clemency. The other ministries were to be helmed by several outstanding people from the lower nobles. These people were formerly barons or knights, who would normally not be qualified for the higher levels of government. They were highly touched by His Highness' decision to remove the restrictive criteria and thereby expressed their willingness to serve him for life. Although they sounded sincere, Nightingale had no doubt that should the situation ever change, such as if Timothy or the Church captured the western region, there was a high chance that these people would quickly forget about their vows. Before the meeting was dismissed, His Highness repeatedly emphasized 2 employment principles. The manpower of each family could be used within the ministries, but the proportion must not exceed 30%, and their files had to be reported to the city hall beforehand. Another point was that no matter whether family manpower was used or not, the salaries of all employees would be paid by the city hall, and any ministry head who kept the money would be harshly punished as criminals. Nightingale was completely uninterested in these details, and thus she yawned repeatedly as she listened, until she caught sight of Maggie flying back into the castle with Countess Spear on her back, and her spirits lifted at once. After the dinner party, a line of people followed Earl of the Elk family to Shio's residence. It was a regular bungalow located in the castle quarter, and the inside of the house was extremely clean, such that not a single shred of paper could be found. Apparently, Shio was well prepared and had destroyed all possible evidence before he acted. Shio spent his days in the castle, and thus we only need to reconstruct what he did at night. The prince advised Summer. I'll need to find out everything he did here from the first time he contacted patrol member Mons until today. Every segment of activity in this house is important. Countess Spear summoned her magic power to connect Maggie and Summer together. Obtaining an abundant amount of magic power temporarily, Summer began to recreate the details of each night. Shio seemed to come back to life. He would sometimes sit in deep thought by the fireplace, and sometimes write things down on paper. All of these segments were recorded by Soraya's eyes. On the fourth day, he sat as usual by the fireplace, but this time he had an emblem in his hands. Wait. I think I've seen this thing before. Roland's voice sounded surprised. Draw it for me. By using a magic pen, the emblem was quickly drawn on paper. It was roughly the size of a thumb, and its body was a gem that was polished into the shape of a button. Identical logos, comprising of a tower and a spear, were engraved on both sides. This was the typical emblem of the royal family. Could he be Timothy's man? Nightingale asked unconsciously. Roland frowned without saying a word, and seemed to ponder for a long while before he shook his head faintly and said, No, this is the keepsake of King Wimbledon III. Are you saying, your father? Renee looked completely astonished. Wasn't the king already? By the eldest prince, Gerald, Petrov was equally shocked. When I was little, I saw this emblem on my father's study desk and even asked him what it was. He told me that every piece of gem represented a warrior who was loyal to the royal family, and therefore the more gems there were, the more stable the throne was. The prince then took a deep sigh. By the looks of it, Shio was a pawn placed by my father by Duke Ryan's side, and helped him to monitor the development and trend of the entire western region. If so, why did he want to kill you? Renee asked. Most likely, Timothy found the gem list and ordered the assassination. To these warriors, the emblem means everything, and hence any and every order must be carried out. That's why. Nightingale glanced at the illusion of the assassin. He observed the emblem for a long time and eventually tossed the gem into the fireplace. His expression seemed a little sad, and at the same time, he revealed a hint of relief on his face. Probably, in Shio's eyes, the order represented a kind of freedom. Having understood clearly the reason for the attempt, Roland did not seem relieved nevertheless. With a grim face, he stared at the sparks in the fireplace and did not shift his gaze for a long time. Late at night, after Summer had fallen asleep, Nightingale quietly snuck into Roland's room. Ever since she was admonished by Wendy, she had not done this again, until now. The assassination attempt had caused a constant undulation of her emotions, and without the presence of Wendy and Anna in the castle, she felt a little more unfettered and free. Watching Roland Wimbledon in his deep sleep, she emerged from the mist and quietly walked up to the bedside. She bent down and kissed Roland on the forehead. Sorry, Your Highness, I can't control myself. Chapter 493, The Gem Mine. Roland rolled out of his bed under the glare of daylight. He put on his coat and walked to the window. The snow covering the buildings outside had partially melted to reveal some areas of red roofs and gray walls, which brought both colors and vitality to the landscape. Inside the room, it was still cold, but if you faced the sunlight, you could also feel a little bit of warmth. The snow had begun to melt. He stepped into his office and saw his breakfast arranged neatly on his desk. As usual, there was a fried egg, 2 pancakes, and a cup of warm water. Nightingale had prepared it for him just like always. Thanks, Roland said to the empty couch. How do you know I'm here? Nightingale said from the couch as she gradually revealed herself. You'll never sit if you get the chance to lie down. He smiled and then put the egg between the pancakes and raised it up to his mouth. Besides, the couch was sinking where you were sitting. How could I not know? No, I like sitting, too. She dashed to the desk and perched herself on the edge of it, like sitting here, she added. Roland would never get tired of seeing her graceful, airy movements, especially the amazing ones she made when she quickly stepped in and out of her mist. You look good. Did you have any nice dreams? Indeed, I had a very nice dream, she answered while raising her eyebrow a little. Good. Roland hurriedly ate his egg and pancake hamburger and continued, Today, you ought to follow me. Because of the assassin? Yes, he replied, if Timothy gave orders to those on the gem list, perhaps there are still other assassins in the western region. However, it's impossible for us to check every single person. He felt it was a shame that people so brave and smart and so loyal to the royal family were employed as assassins. People as capable as they should be placed on more promising positions. With this in mind, Roland became even more resolute to eliminate Timothy's influence as soon as possible. As you wish, Your Highness. Nightingale said with a smile, Where are we going? The mine and the salt well. That's one of the reasons I came to Stronghold. Having summoned Petrov and other relevant personnel in the castle, the exploration group proceeded to the suburb of the city. Roland actually cared more about the iron mines of the Maple Leaf and Wild Rose families, but he still made the gem mine his first stop on the investigative tour, given that gem trade was the primary industry of Longsong Stronghold, and the gem mine was the closest one. The road leading to the mine became spongy and muddy because of the melting snow, making it impossible to access with a carriage. Therefore, the group rode horses and moved very carefully and slowly. It took them almost the whole morning to get to the edge of the impassable mountain range. This experience strengthened Roland's belief in the saying that a good road is an access to wealth. Without a hard-surfaced road to the mine, raising its output would be meaningless since any inclement weather could easily hamper transportation of the ore. They went through a narrow passage and walked into the spacious mine cave, where the mineral vein lay. While 100 torches lined the cave, they could barely light the space inside it. Roland looked around and asked, Is this a natural cave? Yes, Your Highness. Petrov nodded and continued, It was found by accident. It used to be a smooth rock wall, but about 300 years ago, it collapsed during an earthquake and revealed this cave. At first, it was only used by local hunters taking shelter from the rain in the entrance, but eventually, they ventured deeper into the cave, and they found these colorful stones. You know its history very well, Roland said with a smile. These stories are known to every household in the western region. Petrov waved his hands to beckon to a man and introduced him to Roland. This is Denver Crane, the manager of the mine. He will know much more than I about the details of the cave. You're Duke Ryan's man? No, Your Highness. The Cranes doesn't belong to any lord, replied the man called Denver. He looked as if he was in his early 30s, but he spoke like a composed older man. We've lived near this mine for generations and my ancestor was one of the hunters who found this gem mine. We've worked for 3 dukes, and the mine maps my family has drawn could be piled up to the height of a man. No one knows this place better than the Cranes. He was extremely confident with his knowledge of the mine as he spoke with ease and fluency even in front of a prince of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. His sedate manner and black uniform reminded Roland of the stewards of aristocratic families in movies he had seen before. Due to the fact that everyone had been checked by Nightingale, Roland knew this man was not a lurker. So he asked, Why is nobody working here right now? It's because the months of demons has just ended, Your Highness. Denver answered automatically, the snow in the mountains will melt into water and flow down here. Even though we've built drainage ditches and pools to carry water through the mine, we can't take the water out as quickly as it flows in. As a result, we won't be able to get into the mine hole at the bottom. Based on our usual procedures, we have to wait until summer to resume normal mining. Are the iron mines in the territories of the Maple Leaf and Wild Rose families faced with the same situation now? I've never been there, but I've heard that their iron mines are located in higher places, and their mine tunnels stretch upwards. I would guess that their situations may be better, but they'll still have to wait another month before they can mine in their pits. It seems that you may need several steam engines to draw the water out. Roland shrugged. Steam engine, what's that? Denver looked confused. A machine that enables you to continue your mining job in all seasons, answered the prince, smiling. You have a lot to learn about mining. Denver moved his lips a little in disbelief, but he was able to restrain himself from refuting Roland's comment. Roland did not notice Denver's expression. He thought it was only a matter of time for this mine to be equipped with tram roads, water-drawing steam engines, and a traction system similar to those widely used in the North Slope mine of Border Town. They had already successfully sold out a set to a mining tycoon in Silver City. Only he had little interest in gems, so he would put his focus on the iron mines first. Okay, we're done here. Let's leave for the next stop now. Roland turned around. Wait, Your Highness. The Cranes have a little gift for you. Denver, surprised by the prince's sudden decision, walked fast to catch up with him. He took out a small wooden box and handed it to him. Ah? Roland took it with interest. He opened the box and saw 2 glittering gems inside, reflecting dazzling red and green beams in the light of torches. He was startled. They're multicolored stones? Yes, Your Highness. They were picked from the highest quality gemstones and a treasure kept by my family for hundreds of years, said Denver, with a hand on his chest. The Cranes are honored to work for the new lord of the western region. Roland was so attracted by the gems that he missed the latter half of the sentence. They looked very familiar, and even a layman in mining like himself had heard their names. They were called diaspors. Chapter 494, New Resources. When diaspor reached the gem class, it gave off a dazzling light due to its high refractivity and was highly polychromatic. Unlike other gemstones, which changed from one color to another, it gave off many different colors at the same time, most noticeably red and green. It was obvious why locals called it the multicolored stone. Roland did not connect the stone to diaspor when Barab was introducing it, but he instantly recognized it when he saw it in person. Also, when diaspor was dehydrated, it would turn into corundum, and gem-class corundums were the famous ruby and sapphire. Compared to the former, the latter was even more renowned. However, it was not the gemstones themselves that excited him. What about the residue dug out from the mine? The prince asked excitedly as he closed the wooden box after a long time. Are you asking about the debris from digging the mine tunnels? That's right, and not just rocks, but mud as well. How did you deal with them? They were all carted out and dumped at the bottom of the mountain. Denver seemed confused about why the prince was interested in this. Don't worry, Your Highness, all good quality ores were carefully picked out, and the remains were either broken in the mining process or of poor quality and can't be polished into gemstones. Moreover, the screening process is done by the most experienced members of my family. They never miss out good quality ores. You're wrong. Roland smiled and shook his head. Those things you dumped might be the real treasure. What? Denver froze in shock, and the other people also seemed confused. None of them could see the mine residue as treasure. At the time, Roland found it hard to explain this to them, because in this world even steelmaking was difficult to imagine, let alone pure aluminum extraction. Diaspor consisted mainly of aluminum oxide and was a byproduct of bauxite, and its discovery suggested that there was probably a large amount of aluminum in this area. That meant the mud and rocks dumped by them could be used as raw materials for aluminum extraction. As the most abundant metal element in the earth, aluminum was more common than iron and could practically be found everywhere. Lucia could extract small amounts of aluminum from any rock on the ground, but it was clearly not efficient enough for industrial needs. Only places that were rich in aluminum were worth excavating. This cave in front of him was one of those places. Roland called Petrov aside and asked quietly, "How has the Crane family managed this gem mine in the past 200 years? I mean, how did the past lords pay them?" I checked Osmond Ryan's checkbooks, and the payment methods were simple. Every year, the Crane family could choose a box of second-tier gemstones as their fee in a similar manner as weighing grain, explained Petrov. This box is as long and wide as one hand and deep as half a hand, and as long as the cover could be closed, they could take as many gemstones as possible. Of course, the rarest gemstones had to be given to the Lord. That means the 2 gemstones from their family treasure that he just gave me aren't of the best quality? They really are the best in terms of quality, since he wouldn't dare to deceive you, but you know that gemstones are always more expensive when they're bigger. You've also accepted his gifts, correct? Roland stared at the eldest son of the honeysuckle family with great interest. Petrov replied awkwardly, "Yes, Your Highness, I'll give them to you as soon as I get back." "Keep them, I don't care," said the prince nonchalantly. "I'm just curious about how we can assure that this payment is accurate. What if the family secretly takes more gemstones during the excavation? Unless we turned their entire house upside down, we wouldn't be able to detect it. There are people monitoring the transport and filtering each cart of ore, and even if the Crane family steals some, they wouldn't make it too obvious. This is a relationship of checks and balances, since the family is afraid of being punished by the Lord, while the Lord can't find other people who know the mine so well." Petrov paused. "Anyways, if we replace them with our own people, we still can't ensure that no one will steal." "I see." Roland nodded. "Then let's continue with this practice. But besides the multicolored stones, I also want the rocks and mud that they dig up. When we get back, I'll draft an initial gathering plan for you to follow." "Your Highness, is the mud really more valuable than gemstones?" "It depends on whose hands it falls into," replied the prince. "What's so important about aluminum? It has numerous uses. Having low density and lasting quality, it plays a vital role in the industrial production and is a crucial material used in aviation technology. To be honest, aluminum extraction is extremely difficult now, since the amount of electric power required by the electrolysis equipment is way beyond the capability of City of Neverwinter, but Lucia can offer another solution to this problem and may be able to extract some aluminum first with her ability. Then, weapons that are once impossible in this time period will become a possibility, such as large airships." Roland originally planned to focus excavation on the 2 iron mines, but now it seemed that he had to adjust his plan. When he returned to the castle after inspecting the 2 mines and a salt well, the sky was already pitch black. After dinner, Roland excitedly took out a pen and paper and began drafting a utilization plan for the new resources. First was the steam engine. It would drastically increase the efficiency of the draining system in the mines, transportation, and brine extraction in salt wells. As the Maple Leaf and Wild Rose families had fallen, he planned to relocate some experienced workers from the North Slope mine and recruit more workers in the Longsong area, in order for the 2 new iron mines to be operated first and their ores could be transported back to the border area for refining. Meanwhile, the gem mines excavation would have to wait until Lucia got to Longsong Stronghold to determine the aluminum content in the mine. The other focal point was the salt well. As Roland had predicted, besides using the steam engine to drain water and increase production, he also lacked the vital step to refine the products into pure white salt. Since the mineral contents were quite complex, he decided to take a tube of brine from each well, take them back to the border area, and give them to chief alchemist Kyle Sichi to find out the specific refining process. After the process was obtained, he could set up a factory on the spot to produce table salt on a large scale. Of course, the salt industry would be managed exclusively by the city hall, just like grains. The Elk and Honeysuckle family salt wells could receive the City of Neverwinter's technological support, but the refined salt they produced must be sold to the city hall at the set market price, not sold to other buyers in order to gain profit. If he could obtain large amounts of refined salt at a low price, he could undoubtedly create a new commercial path for the City of Neverwinter. Roland believed that this could all become a reality after he defeated Timothy. Chapter 495, On Top of the Ceiling. As the charming beauty slowly approached the harbor, Tilly walked out to see that the dock was filled with witches who had come to welcome her. "Lady Tilly, you're finally back." Molly rushed up to Tilly first with the help of the magic servant. "Wow, how sneaky," Honey complained. "Yeah, where's Orbit?" "Open the door so we can go over too," shouted Shadow. "Stop it. My ability isn't for you to harass Lady Tilly." The crowd immediately erupted into a fit of laughter. Looking at everyone's genuine smiles, Tilly felt her worries from the past few days disappearing. No matter what, this was her real home, a kingdom built by witches. Camilla Derry greeted her on the dock. "You've gone for so long that I was even worried you wouldn't come back." "No chance," Tilly said with a smile. I just didn't expect the months of demons to last so long this time. How has Sleeping Island been? Of course, since you entrusted me with it, I wouldn't let you down, said Camilla with one hand on her chest. The situation has improved overall. Using the sleeping spell was a good idea. I'll report the specifics to you later, but now I'll hand you over to the witches. She blinked. Otherwise they'll eat me alive. As a great noble from King City, Camilla was very skillful at managing things and played a key role in recruiting witches for Tilly. She was the reason why Tilly felt confident leaving the fjords for a long time and investigating the western region. Tilly shook her head helplessly, passed the chief butler of Sleeping Island, raised her hand to the crowd, and was heavily surrounded by a sea of witches. Your Highness, did you see your brother? How did he treat you? I heard that the town also has a witch organization, so will they come and live with us? Is it true that in that desolate little town, people don't have to worry about food and clothing, and they all live in new houses? I'm so glad you're back. Everyone really missed you. Tilly responded to their questions and concerns one by one until Shabby flew onto the dock with a pile of books, and everyone directed their attention to these priceless treasures. What are they? Someone asked curiously. Documents from ancient ruins? They don't look like ancient documents. The pages are new, so they're probably legends. Or maybe they're play scripts? Honestly, I haven't seen a play for a long time. But what should I do since I can't read? Tilly clapped her hands to silence everyone. This is His Highness Roland Wimbledon's presents for you. They include reading and writing pamphlets, basic mathematics, and natural science. Simply put, these are full of knowledge. Knowledge? Most of the witches looked confused, while Camilla and some other noble witches were surprised. Do you actually want to spread knowledge to everyone? Tilly nodded. This is the only way to improve our abilities. Roland once mentioned that universal education was not easy to achieve and needed a great amount of money and time. When people put their jobs on hand to learn, it meant that the domain would temporarily lose some laborers. Also, encouraging them to study required the support of money, which, combined with teachers' salaries and the cost of building schoolhouses, was not a small amount. Most importantly, it would not have instant profits like businesses and needed to be carried out in the long term by the ruler. However, it brought profound changes, even more so for witches and normal people. Tilly had already witnessed this at Border Town. Before she went to the western region, she could never have dreamed that a group of commoners could have such vigor and vitality. After returning to the keep, when she was about to arrange the plan for universal education according to Scroll's methods, Ashes knocked on the door. Thunder wants to see you. Ah, it's been for a long time, Your Highness. Thunder smiled as widely and genuinely as usual. How did it go? Did your trip to the western region address your confusion? Honestly, I didn't get my answer. Tilly shook her head with a smile. He was still reserved towards me. But in our current circumstances, these issues aren't so important for the moment. By the way, do you know about demons? Monsters from hell? Asked Thunder, raising his eyebrows. I've heard a lot about them in epics and legends, where brave knights killed these terrifying enemies with spears dipped in dragon's blood. This time, they're no longer just enemies in books. She sighed. What do you mean? I don't know if those dragons exist, but demons are real. Tilly briefly explained the Witch Union and Battle of Divine Will to him. Where the four kingdoms settle on is used to be barbarian land, so if we lose again, humans will have nowhere to retreat. How could this be? Thunder exclaimed after listening to her silently. All the ruins in different locations are the works of witches, and an ancient witch from 400 years ago was discovered in Border Town? This is unbelievable. The mysteries you uncovered in one journey are more than I did in a lifetime. Tilly was shocked. Aren't you afraid? Afraid? Of course, I am, he said excitedly, but compared to the burning desire for exploration in my heart, this fear means nothing. Damn it, I wish I could go to the kingdom of Grey Castle to see this living fossil with my own eyes. Princess Tilly wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry, his motivation to go to the western region was to see Agatha instead of his own daughter. She did not know how to feel for lightning. If not for my recent expedition, I'd probably have to give you the title of the greatest explorer of the fjords, said Thunder after a fit of exclamations, but I also found something quite amazing. Please, go ahead. I sailed to the east of the Selene again. Selene? Asked Tilly confusedly. What's that? Ah, I forgot that you were still in Border Town the last time I returned. He stroked the back of his head. It's a cliff made from seawater that splits the sea into two surfaces, but boats can still sail freely on it like spiders climbing a wall. What? That's impossible. I had the same reaction as you did the first time I saw it, but the Selene does exist, said Thunder with great pride. What's more incredible is that I sailed on the Courage over the Selene and was lucky enough to witness the tide rise. You have to see it to believe how majestic it was. The flow of the sea water gradually quickens and eventually rushes downwards like falling off a cliff. If Molly's magic servant hadn't protected the boat, the Courage would have been snapped into two. I turned the rudder to steer the bow directly towards the current, which formed a delicate balance with the wind. The Courage couldn't move forward, but also couldn't be brought down the cliff by the current. He panted as if he were reliving the excitement. Of course, the Selene isn't a real cliff. We all know what a waterfall looks like, with water dropping straight down, splattering droplets everywhere and creating a loud rumbling sound, but there wasn't any of that except an accelerating current. I was sure that even if the Courage fell over the Selene, it would have returned to the lower side, just like how it climbed up. What happened next? Asked Tilly impatiently. And then the swirling sea was filled. I could only clearly see this standing on the Selene, said Thunder with a low voice. By the name of three gods, I don't know how to describe my shock at that moment. The height of the Selene shrunk from over 200 meters to about 100 meters as the sea below rose up. This is the reality behind tides. Chapter 496, Under the Deep Sea. The water from the Selene flows downward to cause the lower level water to rise? How is this possible? Tilly pondered for a while. So when the tide falls, will the water flow backwards? Good question. Thunder clenched his fists excitedly. Afterwards, my fleet stayed near the Selene for 2 weeks, until the tide fell. During that time, we tried all kinds of ways to break through the Selene, and the most amazing part was sailing on the Selene itself. Do you know what kind of feeling that is? To outsiders, it seemed as if we were stuck to the face of a cliff, with our sails completely paralleling to the ocean, as if we could fall down at any second. But we couldn't feel this on the boat at all, and it was like the Courage was sailing in a narrow river, with the vast wall of seawater on one side, and the expansive sky on the other. Of course, we had to wait for the water to slow down to do this, otherwise even the magic servant couldn't protect the boat. This makes no sense. Tilly felt her brain sink into total confusion. If some other explorer other than Thunder was telling her this, she would have immediately thought they were making it all up. I think so too, but I trust my own eyes more than common sense. He continued, after 2 weeks, the tide began to fall. It happened at exactly the same time as the tides rose and fell in the Shadow Islands. The seawater did not regorge and simply backed off slowly, and the Selene raised from about 100 meters to over 200 meters once again. Do you mean that all the seawater just disappeared into thin air? Maybe, but it might have also flowed to somewhere else. Where could it flow to? Tilly said, rubbing her forehead. The tides are drastic in the Shadow Islands, much calmer in the Fjord Islands, basically non-existent at the shores of the Four Kingdoms. If this isn't vanishing into thin air, what is it? Thunder pointed at the ground. She sighed. I remember that you once said the sea level in the shadow area dropped very quickly as if there was a giant hole sucking it in at the bottom of the ocean. However, no matter how big the hole is, it should still be filled up after a few years. I'm only guessing. No one has actually seen what the ocean floor looks like, but I'm very curious about one thing. What? Why is the ocean we're in called the Swirling Sea? Tilly felt her heart skip a beat as she came to a realization and shook her head, saying, That's impossible and insane. If an underground cave expelled water to create a whirlpool, how could we not notice it? Also, this name has been around for hundreds of years, so who knows what our ancestors were thinking? That's right. I conducted a simple experiment and found that the water must be shallow enough for the whirlpool to show, but we don't have the ability to see the ocean floor. Thunder smiled. Meanwhile, that doesn't mean that witches can't do it. I never thought of this before, but when you told me that witches ruled this land 400 years ago, I realized that this sea was probably named during that time. I'm a witch, said Tilly with a shrug, and not a single witch on Sleeping Island can do it. I know who can. What? The witch lives right on the fjords but hasn't had any human contact for a long time, Thunder sighed. She used to be a close friend of one of my crew's best assistants, but after she awakened as a witch, she left the continent forever. Now, you can only hear her beautiful singing when mist sets on the sea. You've probably heard stories about her before. The mermaid that guides the ships. Are you talking about the subject of this legend? That's right. Thunder nodded. Although I don't know if she'll help me, it's still worth a try. I might need the help of my old friend Margaret. I see. Then you must hurry, said Tilly with a frown. The merchants in the fjords seem to want to hunt mermaids. A month ago, Sleeping Spell received several offers to capture mermaids. Honey sent me a carrier pigeon telling me the request, but I refused. Her songs are the symbol of peace and safety to the sailors and explorers in the fjords. Those merchants are insane. Thunder asked quietly, can you tell me who they are? Sleeping Spell shouldn't reveal the identities of its customers, but Tilly wrote a few names in the air with her hand. You didn't hear it from me. Since she was also a witch, Tilly could not sit by and do nothing as the leader of Sleeping Island. That's right. He smiled. They'll get what they deserve. The two smiled at each other, and Thunder said, I came to tell you about my new adventures. Besides, I want to ask you a favor. Go ahead. I heard that Crescent Moon Bay has a new kind of boat that isn't powered by wind and can sail much faster than sailboats. My sources told me that this kind of boat was produced in Border Town, said Thunder. If I want to keep exploring the Sealine, I'll need a much bigger and faster boat that can withstand the currents under strong winds. He handed her an envelope. Money isn't an issue, as long as the boats are fast. Can you give him this order? Tilly understood his intentions. You don't want Lightning to know? Thunder said helplessly, if she finds out, she'll insist on going with me. There are too many unknowns in the Sealine, so it's too risky for me to take her. But she's already a great explorer. She was the one who found the stone tower ruins in the misty forest, Tilly thought. However, she still nodded. I understand. I'll act as a temporary messenger between you and Roland Wimbledon. Thank you, Your Highness. After Thunder left, Tilly pondered for a long time and took out the ancient books from the ruins in the Shadow Islands, hoping to find clues about the Sealine or tides. Following the method Agatha taught her, she twisted her magic power according to the shapes of the letters, and their meaning appeared in her mind. It was as if she wasn't reading, but the books were telling her their contents. Some of the books recorded the writer's experiences in the barbarian land, some were sailors' diaries, and others mentioned important plans of the Union. The more she read, the more confused she became. These books had nothing to do with each other, obviously not written by the same person. To her surprise, none of them mentioned anything about the Sealine, the spire under the sea, the telescope, or the giant stone gates, totally different from what she expected. She thought that as long as she could read the Union's words, she could uncover some of the ruins' secrets, or even find the reason why the Shadow Area's sea level rose so quickly. But now, she felt like she was piecing together random scribbles. Wait, piece together? An idea popped into Tilly's head. She spread open 3 of the sailing diaries, placed them together, and checked them carefully. Their dates were far apart, some even decades apart, and their routes varied from the seas near the mainland to the fjords. It was like someone had gathered all these things from different sources and placed them into the ruins. At this thought, she felt a chill creep up her spine. Who would do such a thing? Chapter 497, A Chaotic Departure. The Longsong Area Harbor, City of Neverwinter. 2 concrete boats were docked as workers carried linen bags onto the shore, and the newly appointed officials in the Ministry of Agriculture counted them. The entire harbor was bustling with energy, which was a rare sight for Stronghold, a place still experiencing the aftermath of the months of demons. After being inspected and counted, the seeds in these bags would be distributed directly to every farmer. Your Highness, can the Golden One seeds really triple the wheat production? Petrov was still a little skeptical. Won't that mean that the produce could feed everyone in this city? Barev had said something similar to Roland before. To most of the noble, constant hunger was quite common among the civilians. Feeding everyone is the basic responsibility of a lord. We're only taking the very first step. Also, it's not just because of my benevolence. Hungry subjects can't fully devote themselves to the construction of the city. But, this is no doubt an incredible accomplishment. I don't know of any other city in this kingdom that can achieve it. It's indeed an achievement, but I contributed very little to it. This is mostly the witch's work. Without Leaf's modifications, there would be no golden ones. Petrov was silent for a while. Perhaps we really were wrong before. What do you mean? We had the wrong attitude towards witches. Petrov sighed deeply. Most of the nobles didn't care about the church's propaganda, but we still despised and distrusted the witches, so it wasn't hard for us to go along with the church's violence. Even if we used the witches, we treated them like slaves. Only Your Highness saw their true value and treated them like humans. This is the most incredible part, they really are special. Not only did you ignore the value of witches, but also ignore the power of the people, which is actually even stronger. Witches are like a catalyst, and when they work together with the common people, there can be great improvements in civilization. However, Roland did not say his thoughts out loud. We can still make up for the lost time. After all, we're all the same. Your Highness, the boiler is ready, and the Victory is set to sail, reported a guard. Tell everyone to board the boat. I'll be there shortly. The prince turned to Petrov. The instruction team of the Ministry of Agriculture should arrive by this afternoon. They will show you how to plant the golden ones. As for the mine construction, population growth, universal education, and building factories, we've already discussed enough in the meeting. Just follow the plan and try to address any problems you run into by yourselves before asking me. He patted the eldest honeysuckle son on the shoulder. I'm leaving this place in your hands. If you serve me well, you won't be just the executive officer of the Longsong area forever. I won't let you down, Your Highness. Petrov bowed. Roland boarded the concrete boat and ordered to set sail. Following the long sound of a horn, the Victory slowly left the shore and sailed towards the border area. How many bald boats are there already? Joe clicked his tongue. They're all coming from border town. It's called the border area. Didn't our Lord say that we're all part of the same city as the town now? Snaketooth twitched his mouth. Joe nicknamed the strange sailless boats Bald Boat, but he preferred to call them concrete boats. Their broad gray hulls looked like giant bedrocks, not even budging an inch as the movers ran around on them. What's it called again? City of Neverwinter, Tigerclaw chimed. Who cares? It has nothing to do with us. Joe exclaimed excitedly. You're going to be taking this kind of boat to border town, right? Be sure to figure out why it can move without oars and what the white mist and black fog it spouts are. This really has nothing to do with us, thought Snaketooth. At least the city construction will give everyone a job. Are you really planning on leaving? Sunflower seemed upset. If you have to work as a handyman no matter where you go, why would you go to a foreign place? Because we can earn 1 extra silver royal, said Tigerclaw, chuckling. We can earn 6 silver royals if we stay here, but 7 if we go there. If we can work on either place, we're obviously choosing the one with more money. I wasn't asking you. Sunflower rolled her eyes at him and turned her attention to Snaketooth. For some reason, Snaketooth suddenly felt a little guilty. After the construction of the city of Neverwinter, the Lord kept his promise. and countless recruitment notices suddenly appeared in the square. However, the rats had very few job options, which were mostly handymen and mason apprentices, and they were offered a lower salary than others. Of course, this was still better than their former lives, when they lived lack of food if the salaries could really be distributed on time. He told his friends that he was going to border town for the higher salary, but what he really wanted was to be closer to paper. Faced with Sunflower's intense stare, he decided not to tell the truth and said, "My reasons are the same as Tiger Claw's. Are you ever coming back?" Beep. Beep. Suddenly, a siren began to wail at the harbor, and a red flag began to wave. "It's our turn to leave, hurry." Tiger Claw grabbed Snaketooth's hand and dragged him towards the harbor. The crowd behind them also began to move as the siren rang. When they entered the security inspection area, Snaketooth felt as if he was being carried by the masses. He held his suitcase to his chest and kept staring back, but he couldn't see Sunflower or Joe over the dense waves of people. A few officers in black uniforms were checking tickets at the end of the line. "What's your name?" "Assigned group?" "Take out your documentation." Snaketooth came immediately after Tiger Claw. He took out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and handed it carefully to the officer. "Snaketooth, 5th Construction Team of Red Flag Group." The officer ignored his introduction, scanned his ticket, and slapped it onto his chest. "Boat on the left." "Next." Tiger Claw was already waiting for him at the entrance. "They didn't ask for bribes." "That's amazing." "Indeed, they didn't." Snaketooth half-heartedly folded his documentation, put it in his pocket, and scanned the harbor for his friends. When the concrete boat sounded its horn and slowly sailed away from the harbor, he finally saw them on a flight of stone steps. Sunflower was waving Joe's jacket, while Joe hugged his elbows and crouched behind her. Snaketooth also took off his jacket and waved it furiously, ignoring other passengers' stares of confusion. Their eyes finally met once again. "Take care," he shouted. His friends also seemed to say something, but the sound of the boat's engine drowned out their voices. Sunflower followed the boat along the shore for a while, but the concrete boat was soon too far away and disappeared from her sight. Even then, Snaketooth failed to give her his answer. Chapter 498, The Roland Gunboat. It took Roland a whole day to return to the border area, and his back ached with weariness. After washing his face and brushing his teeth, he went to bed early, and he didn't feel refreshed until noon of the next day. He thought, "I must have a soundproof cabin, a soft desk chair, and a large bed on my private boat. Otherwise, I'll have to sit on a trembling hard deck stool and listen to the roar of the steam engine, which will torture both my body and soul." The first thing Roland did when he walked into his office was to call his director, Bear of Mons, and Minister of Agriculture, Sirius Daly, to his office. Although there was only 1 week left before the planned date of the spring offensive, he could rest assured since Iron Axe was governing the military. The most important thing at the moment was to manage the agricultural production well, namely spring sowing. After all, he would be much less worried when he had a supply of grain. "I saw seeds being transported at the Longsong Pier, so with enough golden ones, the crops there won't be too bad this year. But we should focus on the border area, since we're everyone's model, proof, and example," Roland said with one hand knocking on his desk. "How is the spring sowing going?" "Someone tells me." "Your Highness, here's the situation," Bear spoke first. "Among the first batch of promoted serfs, only 30% of them are willing to continue farming, plus the newly employed ones. The agricultural population is about 10,000. According to last year's average wheat yield, the grain that these 10,000 serfs produce should be able to feed 40,000 to 50,000 people." He paused and then added, "And this number is calculated according to the official citizens' quota for purchasing grains, which is far more than the daily consumption of other cities' citizens. If we calculate according to the minimum amount of grain people need to stay alive, this number can increase by 20,000. "That's about it, Your Highness," Sirius added. "But those conclusions are made by the Ministry of Agriculture according to the statistics from 2 years ago." This year, half of the serfs, mainly newly employed, will use the golden twos modified by Lady Leaf. Honestly, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed that one wheat straw could produce so many ears. Also, more than 2,000 serfs will change to planting potatoes and corn this year, which makes it hard to predict the actual yield for this year. As for the sowing process, farmlands are currently being plowed. According to the crop farming brochure, farmland needs to be plowed 3 times, and raised compost must be mixed in the soil. Usually, this process takes 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the number of laborers and the farm tools they're using. But the serfs employed last year all rented iron tools, which should greatly shorten the plowing time. As for the ditch depth and seeding distance, I've arranged apprentices to educate the serfs to farm with the optimal methods introduced on the farming brochure. It was easy to see that the former knight of the Wolf family had done a lot of research on farming. He obviously had considered all aspects and made points that Roland could not help but agree with. The excessive dependence on the land itself led to the agricultural underdevelopment in this era. Namely, people believed that owning land was all there was to farming. Sometimes, in order to protect the farmlands, they would let farmlands rest for a few years, which was very inefficient. Now that the city of Neverwinter had controllable water irrigation, natural fertilizer, and scientific planting methods, plus Leaf's modified seeds, the land yields greatly surprised all the residents. However, a third of the 30,000 total population was engaged in agricultural production, which was too high of a percentage for Roland. He wanted to efficiently reduce the agricultural population by improving farming tools, such as manufacturing agricultural equipment which used animal or mechanic power. "Well, keep the momentum going," Roland said with satisfaction, "and people who have been assigned to the Longsong area should keep everything well documented, in case we want to extend this model to other cities." After dealing with agricultural affairs, Roland left the castle. Accompanied by Nightingale and the guards, he went to the dock of the Redwater River. The ship, which was constructed by Anna, entered the weapons installation phase 2 days ago. Now, with its hull painted with a gray and red anti-corrosion coating, the ship quietly stood on the crossties. It was the size of about 3 concrete boats and seemed extremely mighty. Unlike the cement paddle steamer, which had no cabin, this ship's side port was almost 3 meters wide and could fit the boiler and steam engine. There were also no paddle wheels on both sides. Another characteristic was a bridge at the center of the hull. Although the bridge was only about 6 meters tall, it looked very prominent. Of course, as a shallow-water gunboat, its most important equipment was its 152mm giant cannon. In order to save the manufacturing time, Roland did not let Anna produce the naval artillery, but tore down the one on the city wall and planned to install it on the ship. Now, it was standing in the dock, waiting for hoisting, the final step. "Your Highness." Anna waved at Roland when she saw him. "Over here." The prince walked over with a smile on his face. "How is it? Is the construction going well?" During his absence in Border Town, Anna took care of all the manufacturing work. Although she had all the blueprints of its key parts, it was entirely an unprecedented huge project, so it was natural to run into all sorts of problems. "Not so well." Anna shook her head. There were some tricky problems: side hull deformation, propeller leaking, hull tilting after being welded with a bridge, and the gun platform couldn't hold a cannon, but I solved all of them. "All solved?" Roland asked surprisedly. "Yes." With a big smile, Anna explained while counting her fingers. "There was a hull deformation because the steel plate of the board was too thin, so I added fixed carriages. The propeller leak was caused by the gap between the casing and the gear lever, so I wrapped the gap with a sink so that the water inside won't run everywhere and can be pumped out by a steam engine. The bridge tilting was caused by uneven weights, which were fixed with a little modification. The gun platform problem was the most difficult one, but I drew inspiration from the revolver design. I first cut a row of indentations on the bottom ring, then I put in a falcula, which could be inserted in between gears, and it could simply fix the upper rotating gun carrier in any direction." Roland blinked his eyes and spoke after a long pause. "You're a genius." For him, those problems were not difficult to deal with, but he had drawn countless mechanic sketches. Especially for the last problem, probably only someone as observative as Anna could associate a revolver with the fixing method of the gun platform. "By the way, Your Highness, does the boat have a name?" "Not yet," he said, raising his eyebrow. "And why do you ask?" "The soldiers from the First Army came every few days and fought eagerly to carve their own names onto the bridge," Anna said with a smile. "They say you promised that the best gunner could have a gunboat named after him." "Ah. I see." Rodney from the Artillery Battalion and Nelson from the Artillery Battalion came to Roland's mind. But not for this ship, because the name of the first warship not only represents the ship itself but also represents its rank and model number. He tilted his mouth. "I can't hand over this honor to anyone else, so I'll name it the Roland number 1. Chapter 499, Prelude to the Spring Offensive. Garden Mansion, the inner city of King City, Kingdom of Grey Castle. Since Roland Wimbledon's surprise attack on the palace which successfully destroyed the Hall of the Sky Dome, Theo's status had greatly improved. Every member of the Dove and Cylinder showed him great respect, and this intelligence organization was finally established. Along with several core personnel, Theo could also affect Skeleton Finger's decisions as a result of his contributions over the past 6 months. He also had a good knowledge of the activities of the other Rats organizations, since he had informants in both the patrol team and the Black Street. They provided him with privileged information only for the money, and they did not care at all who they worked for. However, his gold royals still could not buy his way into the circle of the upper nobles, who cared more about family background and titles. Fortunately, through his connections with the heads of the Rats, who had close relationships with the great nobles, he managed to get some less important information now and then. For example, he heard the news below. "Timothy is sending a platoon of 500 men to block the Redwater River?" Theo tapped on the arm of his chair and asked. "Is he really going to do that?" "Yes," Rockhill answered, "half of his platoon will be blood sail rats. That's what the boss said himself. It's a profitable job, so the rats fought each other over it, and several of them even got injured or killed." "Indeed, it's profitable," Clown whistled and said. "Just think about it. What will they block in the river? The merchant ships. And what's the punishment for violating the king's ban? Confiscating the cargo and imposing a fine. Who can do a better blackmail job than rats? Ah, of course, the patrol team is also good at it. Half of them are rats, so the other half must be Timothy's guards," said Hillfox calmly. "I'm told that in the countryside this morning, there were 4 hawk-headed ships in the harbor." Theo could not help but frown. The hawk-headed ships were high-speed, inland river warships that had slender hulls, with sails and oars, as well as emballons below the water and iron hooks on both sides. Once they caught up with their target, they could be tightly hooked together to enable the soldiers on one ship to easily jump onto another one to fight, making it difficult for merchant ships to escape from them. Based on all the information we've collected already, it's clear that Timothy is going to send a fleet of 4 warships carrying more than 500 people, including over 200 fully armed guards, to block the Redwater River. He sighed inwardly, thinking that it was really bad news. They had got wind of Timothy's intention to block the Redwater River trade route before the months of demons, but most people did not take him seriously back then and thought he would only set a blockade in the canal of King City. Nobody believed that he would dare to set a blockade between the western and central region to declare an economic siege on the city of Neverwinter. That would anger the lords of Silver City and Redwater City, who would never allow this ban to cost them any great economic loss. However, now with 4 warships that could easily block merchant ships anywhere they wanted, Timothy's situation was different, as the other lords could not compete with him at all on the water. Even though this blockade would turn the lords against him, nothing could shake his resolve to defeat Roland. Theo looked at Hill, who nodded at him and voiced the same thoughts. Timothy may not set a fixed blockade on the Redwater River. He'll just attack any caravan he spots, and his troops will act as pirates on water and bandits on land. An enemy force of 500 people is indeed a nightmare for any caravan. By doing so, he'll probably succeed in cutting off the Western region's supplies. We have to report this to His Highness as soon as possible, Theo said in a deep voice. Last year, Border Town had bought a large amount of grain, clothes, and ore, and this year, because of the town's merger with Longsong Stronghold, it had a much higher demand for resources. If Timothy succeeded in his attempt, it would definitely cause Prince Roland massive trouble. They worried about this vexing issue for His Highness and wondered if he could solve this problem. Sounds of flapping wings then came from the backyard. As Theo stood up to open the door to the backyard, a gray falcon flew in as quickly as a flash of lightning and gently landed on his shoulder. The circus members simultaneously lowered their heads, putting their hands on their chests, to show respect for the message from the Western region. Theo took a piece of paper from the messenger and glanced at it. His heart skipped a beat. Ha, ha, ha. He could not help himself from laughing out loud, even though he knew that he should hide his emotions as an intelligence officer. It was such timely, good news for him. We don't need to worry about it anymore, he said with visible joy. His Highness already knows about it? Hill asked. No, but he's going to solve it once and for all, he said in a low but excited voice. Once and for all? Clown was confused. You mean? Yes, the first army of His Highness has already left for King City. Theo clenched his fists. It's time to overthrow Timothy. He had known that His Highness would launch his attack this year, but he never expected it to happen so soon, as the prince had not told him any specifics about the attack in order to keep the plan secret. Now, he finally knew that the attack was actually scheduled for spring, just in time for the plowing season. It's finally time. Hill inhaled deeply, suddenly got down on one knee, and said, just give us His Highness's orders. For the new king, the other 5 people shouted and kneeled likewise. The thought of the new kingdom also excited Theo. If Timothy was overthrown, Roland Wimbledon would become the only successor to the throne of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. And if Roland was crowned king, Theo would probably gain greater power and reach a new height that he had never dreamed of before. He did not even have to think about their chances of winning. Anyone who had witnessed the first army in action would never doubt that Roland would be victorious over Timothy in this attack. His Highness orders us to stay away from the west gate of King City. He also orders us to prevent the rats from taking advantage of the chaos during the attack, and to restore the social order as soon as possible after the war. Theo slowly read out the remaining part of the secret letter. Do everything in your power to help the civilians suffering in the war, such as providing medical aid, free shelter, and food, and hand over this job to the First Army when the situation is stable. That's it? All of them looked at each other and were totally at a loss. His Highness didn't order us to trick the guards into opening the city gate, or set fires in different directions in order to mislead the enemy? No, those were His Highness's wishes. Theo put the letter away and said with a smile. He thought it was just like Roland's style to care more about the people and social order, not to compel any intelligence personnel to step onto the battlefield. He felt that Roland's order also suggested that the prince thought nothing of Timothy's forces. Chapter 500, Body of Steel, Part 1. Roland stood on the balcony on top of the command room of his boat and felt his heart stir with pride as he watched his fleet of boats lined up behind him. Besides the flagship, the Roland, all the other boats were slow and clumsy concrete boats. However, with more than 10 of them in a fleet, they still looked magnificent. The massive fleet puffed long trails of white smoke out of their chimneys and parted the river as they crashed through the waves, and they seemed to be completely unstoppable. The gunboat was apparently the fleet's main attraction. Its towering bridge and sleek appearance separated it from ordinary sailing ships and concrete boats. It dominated the inland rivers with its weapons, including a 152mm main cannon and 2 Mark I machine guns, custom-made high-pressure steam engine, and a propeller-driving system that enabled it to reach a speed of 12 km per hour. You seem to be in a good mood, Nightingale observed as she tidied her windswept hair. Is it because you'll be returning home soon? You mean, the palace? No way, I'm never going back there, he said, shaking his head. The Western region is my real home. I'm happy because this conflict will be over soon. Half of that is a lie. Roland remembered with a shock that she could tell when people were lying. Alright, I'm actually proud of myself for managing to produce many boats during the months of demons. You're telling the truth this time. Nightingale blinked. But you sound a little full of yourself. That's why I lied. That's understandable. She chuckled and walked over to Roland. I don't blame you. I wouldn't mind if you told a little lie, as long as it has nothing to do with me. If you don't mind, then don't point out my lies, thought Roland querulously. By the way, I never thanked you, whispered Nightingale as she gazed into the distance. Thank me for what? For ending the conflict and bringing peace to the kingdom of Grey Castle. Both commoners and witches will live happily under your rule, she said slowly. I always knew that you'd achieve this, but I didn't think it'd happen so soon. It's not that fast. Even after I dethrone Timothy, the noble will resist with all their might. Uniting the entire Grey Castle may take another few years. Roland sighed. Progress is never easy, so we still have a long way to go in achieving our goal. This is already so much better than I imagined. Before this, I was worried I would never live to see this day. Come on, don't say like that. Roland glared at her. Do you think I'll put you in danger? It's expected for a combat which like me to always be in battle, and breaking convention takes sacrifice. Nightingale turned her head. I had prepared for this the moment I swore my loyalty to you. I'm sorry I let you down, Roland said with a shrug. There will definitely be sacrifices, but our enemies will be making them. Anyway, I should thank you. Why? Nightingale asked in surprise. Because if I never met a witch, I wouldn't have the confidence to do what I'm doing now. If not for Anna, he would not have decided to save these witches, and if there was not magic power in this world, he would still be cautiously living his primitive life in a rundown border town. You're telling the truth. Nightingale looked up at him. Of course I am, said Roland with a smile. Suddenly, a golden figure descended from the sky and landed next to them. Your Highness, for sloops with paddles on both sides are approaching us from 20 kilometers away, and they look like the hawk-headed ships described in the report, said Lightning, but I didn't see any hawk statues on the ships. The hawk head probably refers to the Emblan underwater. Roland patted her head. Good job, keep up the good work. So, can I do less practice questions as punishment? The little girl stared at the prince with begging eyes. He could not help but laugh. All right. If you promise to keep still in the future, you only have to do one set of questions. Yes, sir. Lightning's eyes lit up, and she immediately leapt up and flew towards the east in a flash. You shouldn't have let her off so easy. Nightingale complained. She'll learn her lesson if she's rewarded. Roland dismissed her criticism with a wave and turned to walk towards the stairs. Let's go back to the command room. We have work to do. The small, square command room contained nothing but a wooden table and 4 benches. The commander of the 1st Army Iron Axe, the leader of the gun battalion Brian, the leader of the artillery battalion Vanner, and the captain of the Victory Kikuzim stood by the table to draft the battle plan for their first battle in the river. According to Theo's report, Timothy's 4 battleships are inland galleys. They're about as fast as our concrete boats, but they're agiler. Roland said, pointing to the chart on the table. Usually, these ships will approach enemy ships, so their crews can jump onto them and fight. They can also be filled with flammables such as gunpowder or sulfur and crash into their target, destroying both ships. However, since our enemy's goal is to block the river and plunder our boats, they probably won't use the second method. This is our first time to fight on a river, so please feel free to share any ideas you have. Your Highness, it'll be hard to hit a moving target with a moving cannon, so I suggest we fire when we're closer to their ships, suggested Vanner. As long as we're about 50 meters away, I promise every cannonball will sink an enemy ship. But I hear that firing shells not only wastes a lot of gunpowder, but also requires Miss Anna to make the shells, said Brian, shaking his head. I think it's better to wait for the enemy to board our ships and then riddle them with the bullets from our heavy machine guns. Roland turned to Kakuzum and said, "What do you think?" He summoned this old man into the command room because he was the only person in the city of Neverwinter who had fought on boats before. According to him, he ran into pirates many times when he was a merchant, and even being plundered still counted as a kind of experience. Your Highness," Kakuzum hesitated for a while. "In my opinion, we should just charge towards them." "What?" the other two men all asked, staring in shock. "Your ship is large, fast, and made of steel, so their wooden ships will probably collapse upon contact. Even if you don't destroy them, any leaks will prevent them from moving further." He glanced at everyone. "Of course, this is just my personal opinion." This tactic reminded Roland of a poem that said, "With the sun shining and waves high, a D flag hangs from the mast." "Alright, let's follow this plan," he finally decided. "Even though we don't have a D flag, a flag with a tower and 4 stars will have the same effect. I order the Roland to raise the flag of City of Neverwinter, sound its horn, and proceed at full speed ahead."